Prologue. Whispers beneath the moonlight. Long ago, before Valkorn of Sintra became the crown jewel of the north, before the ice sang lullabies through its frozen pines and warriors bowed before the alpha werewolf king, there were whispers, ancient, haunting, and heavy with prophecy. They spoke of two stars destined to collide, one born of frost, the other of flame, both forged in battle, scarred by loss, and destined to change the world. In the time of the old wolves, the moon goddess wept for the blood spilled beneath her gaze, so she hid a piece of her light in the hearts of mortals, not kings or queens, but those brave enough to love amidst war, to choose peace when the world burned. Centuries passed, Valkorn rose from snow and stone, the clans warred, the Forsaken returned, and so did the dark shadow lord, Malagar. And in the heart of it all, Rand, the Alpha King's next in line carved of winter, and Navara, the spark of fire born from the cold icy snow plains of Okaniv, whose spirit defied fate. Their love wasn't written in fairy tales. It was a bond written in sweat and magic, in soft glances across the training grounds, in stolen moments under starlight, and vows whispered between bruises and broken armor. But their union was never just romance. It was revolution. For when the frost meets flame, the world must either melt or shatter, and so it began, not with a coronation or battle cry, but with the quiet footsteps of a warrior learning to fight beside the man she once nursed, and would soon come to love beyond death. Welcome to Valkorn of Sintra, where legends fall and love rises. Welcome back to my channel. This is an audiobook for Mated to Nivara, a story of love, betrayal, and redemption in a world where light and darkness collide. Written and narrated by Cauliflower Campbell. This channel brings you stories for both adults and teenagers, with powerful lessons hidden in every tale. We post mainly on Saturdays, sharing everything from full-length audiobooks to short-chaptered ones. You'll find fantasy, romance, thrillers, mysteries, suspense, and adventure waiting for you in our playlists. So get ready for a breathtaking journey, where werewolves roam, forbidden magic brews, and love dares to defy destiny. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you'd like early access and exclusive stories, become a member of the channel. Now, let the story continue. Chapter 1. The Frozen Heart of Okaniv. The North Pole was a place of endless night and eternal frost, where the land was as unforgiving as the biting winds that howled through the jagged ice peaks. In this frozen expanse, beyond the reach of ordinary men, lay Okaniv, a village hidden within the heart of the tundra. Here, the Kilari clan had endured for generations, ice-wielding werewolves, their very souls intertwined with the frost that surrounded them. The people of Okaniv were a proud and ancient race, their existence woven into the tapestry of ice and legend. They lived under the rule of Chief Tarnuk, a man of unwavering strength and wisdom, whose dark black hair bore the streaks of time, and whose brown eyes held the weight of 1,000 battles. He had led his people through both bitter winters and unseen threats, guarding their survival with an iron will. But the world was no longer safe. A shadow stirred in the darkness. Malagar, a force older than the ice itself, lurked in the abyss, feeding on the spirits of wolves, turning werewolves into hollow shells of their former selves. Those who fell victim to Malagar were lost, their bodies still human, but their souls corrupted. And yet, even in the coldest darkness, there was always a flicker of light. That light burned within Navara, daughter of Chief Tarnuk. A girl of unparalleled beauty, she was known across the village for her long, flowing black hair, darker than the winter sky, and eyes the color of the ocean, deep and full of untold stories. But those eyes, so filled with wonder, also carried a secret longing, a desire that stretched beyond the ice, beyond the ancient traditions of her people. The moon's silver glow. It was on the longest night of the year that the elders gathered around the great fire, their voices hushed as they spoke of the prophecy. the tale whispered through generations, etched in the very bones of the land. "The moon's silver glow has always whispered our destiny," murmured Elder Kama, his wrinkled hands outstretched toward the flames. The Kilari clan sat in rapt silence, the only sound the distant howling of wolves. They had heard this prophecy before, yet each time it carried a weight heavier than before. There will come a man, accompanied by the wolf of snow, a guide of light, one who will stand against the shadow and restore the balance. A ripple of unease spread through the gathering. Could such a man truly exist? Could one person challenge the ancient terror of Malagar? Among those listening, Navara felt her heart tighten. A part of her believed in the prophecy more than anyone else. She had seen visions, glimpses of something, or someone, approaching from beyond the frozen wastelands, and yet no one had ever crossed the borders of Okaniv. Except for the warriors and traders, no outsider had ever stepped onto their sacred ground. Navara's dream. Navara was dreaming that night in their karmak. She walked past the thick wooden gates that marked the entrance to the village. Beyond them, the endless tundra stretched out like an empty dream, white and boundless under the pale moonlight. She had always felt it, the pull of something greater, something beyond the constraints of duty and tradition. A gust of wind lashed against her parka, and suddenly she felt it, a shift in the air. A presence. Navara's breath hitched as she turned her gaze toward the northern horizon. The tundra was bathed in moonlight, the ice shimmering like a sea of frozen diamonds. And yet, something moved in the distance. At first, it was just a shadow, barely distinguishable against the storm clouds that brood on the edge of the world. But then, it became clearer. A figure. A man. He walked through the snow as if he had always belonged there, his steps sure and unyielding, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly silver. Navara's heart pounded in her chest. Could it be? Before she could think, before she could breathe, she woke up from the dream with a gasp. Chapter 2. The Shadow. Malagar. A darkness awakens. The winds howled across the frozen tundra, whispering of an ancient terror. In Okaniv, where the Kilari clan had endured for centuries, a new fear had taken root: Malagar. No one knew exactly where he came from, only that his presence had spread like a sickness, a shadow creeping into the deepest corners of the land. Hunters who once roamed the wilderness freely now feared the forests. They spoke in hushed tones of an entity that did not kill with claws or teeth, but with something far worse, an endless, soul-consuming hunger. "He is the devourer of werewolf souls," the elders murmured, their voices barely above a whisper, as if speaking his name too loudly would summon him. Those who encountered him did not die in the ordinary sense. Their bodies remained, but their spirits, their wolves, were stripped away, leaving them as twisted, empty shells. The people of Okaniv had a name for them: Hollow Ones, their once proud warriors, now nothing more than sinister echoes of what they had been. And now, that cursed presence had reached the village. Warnings in the karmak. The karmak of the sacred hall of the wise was shrouded in the flickering glow of firelight. Inside, Chief Tarnuk stood before his people, his broad shoulders casting long shadows against the carved walls. His face was set in a grim expression, his deep brown eyes heavy with concern. At his side, Navara sat motionless, listening. Her father's voice was solemn, steady, yet filled with an unspoken urgency. Malagar's hunger is insatiable. It leaves behind nothing but sinister echoes. The gathered elders nodded in grave agreement. "We have already lost too many to the Hollow Ones. The forests are no longer safe. We must not stray beyond the village boundaries." Murmurs of unease rippled through the room. The hunters shifted uncomfortably where they sat, their weapons resting at their sides. Navara clenched her hands into fists. She had always known the world beyond Okaniv was dangerous, but now it felt suffocating, as though an invisible force was closing in around them. Her father continued, his voice edged with quiet determination. The Alpha King, Fenrir, will not let this darkness go unanswered. If Malagar dares to extend his reach to Valkorn, the Empire will strike him down. But until then, we must remain vigilant. The kingdom of Valkorn. Far beyond the frozen lands of Okaniv, across towering mountain ranges and vast stormy seas, lay the grand capital of Valkorn of Sintra. It was a city unlike any other, a kingdom of werewolves, ruled by the mighty Alpha King Fenrir. The city itself was a masterpiece of power and elegance. Towering ivory castles stretched toward the heavens, their peaks glistening under the light of the twin moons. Massive stone bridges arched over shimmering rivers, connecting the sprawling districts of the city, and above it all, floating airships drifted like silent guardians, patrolling the skies. At the heart of Valkorn stood the Alpha Werewolf King himself, Fenrir. With silver dark hair and piercing brown eyes, he was both warrior and ruler, a force of nature unmatched in battle. Beside him, his queen Isla, a vision of grace and power, her long silver hair flowing like moonlight, watched over their empire with unwavering devotion. But even Valkorn was not untouched by the growing darkness. The lost prince. The kingdom had been shaken to its core by a devastating loss, the disappearance of Prince Randor Fenrirson. Randor was more than just the heir to the throne. He was a warrior, a leader, a symbol of strength for his people. Handsome and formidable, he bore the silver dark hair of his father, yet his ocean blue eyes carried a depth of emotion that set him apart. When the shadows began creeping into the edges of Valkorn, Randor had been tasked with eliminating them, and so he had set out, aboard his flagship airship, leading his elite warriors into the heart of the unknown. But then, he vanished. No trace, no message, nothing but the empty skies where his ship had once flown. The kingdom was thrown into turmoil. Desperate, Alpha King Fenrir had sent search party after search party, scouring the skies and the lands beyond, but each time they returned empty-handed, and now, with Malagar's forces growing bolder, with the Hollow Ones creeping ever closer, time was running out, a destiny unfolding. Back in Okaniv, Navara stood at the village's edge, staring out over the frozen landscape. The sky above was dark and endless, the stars gleaming like scattered ice. The words of the prophecy echoed in her mind. There will come a man, accompanied by the wolf of snow, a guide of light, one who will stand against the shadow and restore the balance. Somewhere out there, a great battle was brewing, a battle between light and darkness. And Navara knew, deep in her heart, her fate was tied to it. Chapter 3. A Fateful Rescue. Hunting under the northern moon, the icy winds swept across the frozen landscape of Okaniv, rustling through the towering pine trees that bordered the shimmering lake. Navara pulled her thick fur parka tighter around her shoulders as she and Vorunak trekked through the frost-covered terrain, their boots crunching against the snow. The air smelled of pine, fresh water, and the distant scent of prey. "We haven't hunted in a while," Vorunak mused, his sharp brown eyes scanning the forest. "Before we fish, why not stretch our legs as wolves?" Navara grinned, her excitement flaring. "You read my mind." Without another word, the siblings stepped away from the lake's edge, moving deeper into the shadows of the trees. Navara closed her eyes and let the familiar tingling sensation rush through her body as she surrendered to the shift. Her bones reshaped, her muscles stretched, and her dark black hair melted into the thick, pristine white fur of her wolf form. A powerful surge of energy coursed through her as she shook out her parka, her sharp claws digging into the ice-packed ground. Beside her, Vorunak had also shifted, his massive form standing taller, his thick white fur ruffled by the wind. His piercing gaze met hers, and without a word, they both took off. The hunt begins. Their paws barely touched the snow as they raced through the frozen forest, weaving between the trees with practiced ease. The sense of the wild flooded Navara's senses, the crispness of the ice, the musk of nearby elk and the faintest trace of a snow hare burrowed beneath a fallen log. Vorunak let out a low growl, signaling he had found their prey. Navara slowed, her ears flicking forward as she caught sight of a lone caribou grazing near the edge of a frozen ravine. A perfect target. They moved in tandem, their instincts guiding them. Navara crept to the left, her breath slow and steady, while Vorunak flanked from the right. The caribou's ears twitched, sensing danger too late. With a powerful leap, Navara launched herself, her claws sinking into the creature's flank as Vorunak lunged for its throat. A brief struggle, then silence. The siblings stood over their fresh kill, their breaths visible in the cold air. Navara licked the blood from her muzzle before nudging Vorunak playfully. "I think I softened it up for you," she teased through their mind link. Vorunak huffed, nudging her back. "You mean you startled it, and I finished the job." They shared a brief moment of triumph before deciding to leave the kill for the village. It would serve the pack well, and Okaniv would be grateful for the fresh meat. Back to the lake. Shifting back into their human forms, Navara shivered as the cold bit at her skin before she quickly wrapped herself in her parka. Vorunak did the same, adjusting his furs as they made their way back to the lake, their breath coming out in soft puffs. The lake was still and glassy under the pale afternoon light. They retrieved their fishing gear, settling on the ice and cutting holes into the frozen surface. Navara dipped her line into the water, glancing at her brother. "That was a good hunt," she said, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction. Vorunak smirked, casting his line into the depths. "And now let's see if your fishing skills are as good as your hunting skills, little sister." Navara rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. For now, life was peaceful. But deep in her heart, she felt the shift in the winds. Change was coming, and soon their quiet days in Okaniv would be over. But for now, they fished, enjoying the final moments of peace before the storm. The frozen lake stretched endlessly beneath a sky of swirling snow, its glassy surface reflecting the pale light of the sun as it struggled to pierce the winter haze. Navara stood at the edge, her boots pressing into the brittle ice, the cold seeping through the thick layers of fur wrapped around her. Beside her, her elder brother Vorunak cast his fishing line into a break in the ice, his dark brown eyes scanning the water below. "Patience, Nivara," he murmured, his breath rising in a mist. "The fish sense your restlessness." Navara bit her lip, trying to still the excitement in her chest. Fishing had never been her passion, but these quiet moments with Vorunak were rare. He was always busy with the warriors, training for the day he would take on more responsibilities as Tarnuk's heir, while she, Navara, was still searching for her place in the clan. Her gaze drifted across the frozen expanse, lost in thought, until she saw it. A dark shape, drifting just beneath the surface. At first, she thought it was a piece of driftwood carried by the currents beneath the ice. But then, a hand. A surge of adrenaline shot through her veins. "Vorunak," she gasped, pointing. Her brother turned just as the body came into full view. A man, half submerged, his silver-dark hair fanning out in the water like ink spilling across the ice. Navara didn't think. She acted. Before Vorunak could grab her, she plunged into the frigid depths. The rescue. The cold was like 1,000 knives piercing her skin, but she pushed forward, her heart hammering as she reached for the stranger. He was unconscious, his body heavy with the weight of the water. Navara wrapped her arms around his chest, kicking desperately to the surface. She broke through, gasping, dragging him onto the ice. Vorunak was already there, pulling them both onto solid ground. His face was a mixture of concern and frustration. "Are you mad?" he scolded, wrapping his own parka around her. "You could have drowned!" But Navara barely heard him. She was staring at the man, his broad, muscular frame, his face sharp and striking despite its frozen pallor, and on his hand, a star-shaped mark. Something about it stirred a memory deep within her, but she couldn't place it. "We need to get him out of here before anyone sees," she whispered. Vorunak hesitated. "Nivara, he's an outsider. We don't know who he is. Then we need to find out." Her brother exhaled sharply but didn't argue. She hoisted the stranger up, and Navara led the way to a hidden cave carved into the cliffs just beyond the village. "I'm going to get help from the village. Stay away from him, Navara," Vorunak said before running off taking the caribou they hunted earlier with him. The cave. The cave was cold, but at least it offered shelter. Navara laid the man down on the dry ground, his chest rising and falling in slow, shallow breaths. She decided to warm him because he won't last long if she doesn't warm him up. She hesitated, then removed her thick parka and placed it over him. The icy air bit into her skin, but she ignored it, remaining in only her atiji, a thinner coat meant for indoor wear. As she sat beside him, the firelight flickered, casting golden shadows across his face. He was beautiful. She swallowed hard, dragging her gaze away. What was wrong with her? This man was a mystery, possibly even a threat, and yet something about him pulled at her. She spent the rest of the afternoon tending to him, watching, waiting. When dusk settled over the land, he still had not woken. "I need to get food," she whispered, rising. She didn't want to leave him alone, but she had no choice. She stepped outside and walked straight into Vorunak and 3 pack warriors. The lie. "Where have you been?" one of the warriors demanded. Navara's mind raced. The warriors looked suspicious, their eyes sharp with scrutiny. If they found the stranger, he would be captured, or worse. She hesitated, then forced a breath. "I found a man in the lake. He was barely alive. But he woke up and ran away." She gestured vaguely toward the trees. "He took my parka with him." The warriors exchanged looks, their expressions hard. "An outsider?" one of them growled. "We should track him down," another said. Vorunak, however, watched Navara carefully. She had always been a terrible liar, too pure-hearted, too honest, but this time she had woven deception into her voice with surprising ease. And Vorunak, her brother, her protector, understood why. If their father, Chief Tarnuk, discovered Navara was helping a stranger, there would be consequences. So Vorunak did something Navara never expected. He played along. "If he fled, he won't last long in this cold," he said, turning to the warriors. "We'll send a scouting team in the morning. Let's go back." Reluctantly, the warriors agreed, and soon they were heading back toward the village. Navara let out a silent breath of relief. Vorunak said nothing until the others were out of earshot. Then he turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I don't know what you're doing, Navara," he said quietly. "But be careful. If Father finds out, even I won't be able to protect you." She nodded, her heart still pounding. When she returned home to her karmak, she laid down quietly after supper and thought about her long day. She remembered the star-shaped mark on his hand. Who was he? And why did she feel as though she had just become part of something much bigger than herself? Chapter 4. Awakening in the Cave. The first light of dawn stretched across the frozen horizon, casting a pale glow over Okaniv's icy terrain. The village remained shrouded in slumber, save for the few hunters who prepared for the day's expedition. Navara, however, was already awake, her mind consumed with thoughts of the mysterious stranger. The events of the previous day still lingered in her thoughts. His unconscious form in the frozen water, the strange star-shaped mark on his hand, and the lie she had told to protect him. She needed to return to the cave. Gathering supplies, she packed a small pouch of dried meat, fish, and warm broth before slipping out of the village unseen. The cold air bit into her skin, but she barely noticed as she made her way toward the cave, her heart beating in anticipation. But the moment she stepped inside, she froze. He was gone, lost again. A surge of panic rushed through her. She hurried out, scanning the snow-covered terrain for any sign of him. Then, just beyond a cluster of frost-coated trees, she spotted him. unconscious. Again. Navara rushed forward, kneeling beside him. His silver-dark hair was dusted with snow, his breathing shallow, and his skin dangerously cold once more. "Why do you keep doing this?" she muttered, exasperated but worried. Summoning all her strength, she dragged him back inside the cave. Her muscles burned, but she refused to leave him out in the cold. She rekindled the fire, rubbing warmth back into his limbs, watching his chest rise and fall weakly. And then he stirred. His lashes fluttered, revealing a pair of piercing ocean-blue eyes. For a moment, there was only silence. The staring game. He stared at her. Navara felt her breath hitch, an inexplicable tension thickening the air between them. His gaze was intense, searching, like he was trying to memorize every detail of her face. Navara's stomach tightened. Why is he looking at me like that? Flustered, she cleared her throat. The sound seemed to break whatever trance he was in, and he quickly looked away. Navara exhaled softly, regaining her composure. "You're awake," she said, trying to mask her relief. He didn't respond. Instead, he continued watching her from the corner of his eye, his expression unreadable. A simple meal. Determined to ignore the odd tension, Navara reached for the pouch she had brought and pulled out the food. "You need to eat," she said, holding out a small piece of dried fish. He hesitated, as if unfamiliar with the idea, before finally accepting it. The way he held the food delicately, as if unsure of its taste, made Navara wonder when was the last time he had eaten. When he took a bite, his gaze never left her. "Thank you," he whispered. The quiet sincerity in his voice made something warm bloom inside her chest. She smiled, unable to help herself. For the rest of the morning, she stayed by his side, ensuring he ate enough, checking for any lingering signs of illness or injury. The questions begin. As the day stretched on, the silence between them softened. It was he who finally spoke first. "What's your name?" he asked. "Navara," she answered, watching him carefully. There was a brief pause before she gathered the courage to ask the one question that had been nagging at her since she found him. "What's yours?" His ocean-blue eyes darkened slightly. He didn't answer. Navara frowned. Why wouldn't he say his name? "You don't know?" she pressed. He averted his gaze, his expression troubled. "I don't remember," he admitted finally. Navara's eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" He exhaled, running a hand through his silver-dark hair, as if trying to grasp onto something just beyond his reach. "I remember yesterday," he said slowly. "Yesterday?" Navara echoed, confused. "Yes, I remember you. I remember the fire, the cave. But before that, nothing." A chill ran down Navara's spine, but it had nothing to do with the cold. He had no memory of who he was. And yet, for reasons she couldn't explain, Navara felt that his arrival in Okaniv was no accident. This was just the beginning. Chapter 5. Ryunara and Zakara. The sky over Okaniv was a deep, endless black, the stars glimmering like ice shards scattered across the heavens. The village lay in near silence, save for the occasional howl of distant wolves and the crisp crunch of snow beneath Navara's boots. She knew she had to return home. The village was notorious for its strict curfews, and if she lingered any longer, her absence would raise suspicion. But as she turned to leave, her gaze fell upon him once more, the nameless, memoryless stranger, wrapped in the warmth of the fire's glow. A strange pull anchored her to the spot, something far stronger than reason. She couldn't leave him alone. "Can you walk?" she asked softly. The stranger blinked, his ocean-blue eyes clouded with exhaustion, but he nodded. "I can try," he murmured. Navara moved closer, offering her arm for support. The moment he leaned into her, she realized just how heavy he was, his broad shoulders and muscular frame pressing against her, making it nearly impossible to balance. She staggered slightly but held firm. "Come on," she whispered. A chance encounter. The journey back to the village was slow, the cold biting at her exposed skin as she struggled to support his weight. But just as the village came into view, a familiar silhouette emerged from the shadows. Zekara. Navara's heart leaped into her throat. Zekara, her eldest sister, was a striking young woman, her dark hair framing sharp, intelligent eyes, her presence commanding yet graceful. Navara instantly knew why she was there. "Mother sent you," Navara guessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Zekara's expression hardened, her gaze flickering between Navara and the stranger. "What are you doing?" she asked, arms crossed. Navara hesitated before answering, her grip tightening on the man beside her. I found him by the river, almost lifeless. He needs help." Zekara's brow furrowed. She could see the urgency in Navara's eyes, but she also knew their village's rules. Bringing an outsider, especially an unknown man, into Okaniv was a risk. Yet Zekara sighed and stepped forward, placing one of the man's arms over her own shoulders. "We'll talk later. Let's just get him inside." Together, the sisters half-carried, half-dragged the stranger toward their karmak, the hidden guest. The moment they crossed the threshold, Navara and Zekara gently lowered the stranger onto a pile of warm furs. "Stay quiet," Zekara whispered as she covered him with another layer of fur. Navara sat beside him, watching his chest rise and fall steadily. He had already drifted into unconsciousness. She didn't realize just how exhausted she was until she lay down beside the fire. Within moments, sleep took her. Morning comes with judgment. A loud gasp jolted Navara awake. Her mother, Ryunara, stood over them, her dark brown eyes wide with disbelief. The morning light filtered through the entrance, illuminating the soft features of their mother's face. Ryunara was a woman of great wisdom and unmatched beauty, her long dark hair cascading like a river of ink over her shoulders. But in that moment, her gaze burned with quiet fury. "What were you thinking?" Navara sat up abruptly, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Beside her, Zekara was already on her feet, her arms crossed in silent defiance. Navara swallowed hard before speaking. "Mother, I found him in the river. You brought a stranger into our home." Ryunara's voice was low, laced with warning. "He was dying," Navara protested. Ryunara's gaze flickered to the man, who was still sleeping. Her expression hardened. Then her eyes landed on his hand, and everything changed. She froze, her breath hitching. A deep gasp escaped her lips. The star-shaped mark on his hand seemed to glow faintly in the morning light. "Who are you?" she demanded. At that moment, the stranger stirred, his ocean blue eyes slowly opening. But before he could answer, Navara spoke first. "He doesn't remember," she blurted out. Ryunara turned back to her, suspicion flickering in her gaze. "Let's just let him stay until his memories return," Navara pleaded. The room was thick with silence, the tension between them stretching unbearably. Then, at last, Ryunara sighed. "Fine," she said, her voice firm but reluctant. "But Tarnuk cannot find out now." Navara felt a wave of relief wash over her. Before leaving, Ryunara placed a gentle yet firm hand on Navara's shoulder. "Be careful," she warned. "There is more to this than you understand." As she turned to leave, Zekara lingered behind, staring at her younger sister with a knowing look. "You're in trouble, Nivara," she murmured. Then, she too was gone. And Nivara was left alone, with the mystery she had brought into their home. Chapter 6. Secrets and Suspicions. A hushed stillness filled the karmak. The only sound coming was from the crackling of the small fire Navara had kept burning. The stranger sat propped against the furs, his ocean blue eyes watching her intently, as though trying to solve an unspoken riddle. Navara fidgeted under his gaze, stirring the embers absently with a wooden stick. The warmth of the fire did little to ease the strange tension between them. Finally he spoke, his voice low and quiet. "Why are you kind to me?" Navara glanced up sharply, caught off guard. For a moment she hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "You remind me of someone, my best friend Silkara. You look alike," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. He frowned slightly, as though trying to reach for a memory just out of grasp, but eventually he let it go. Navara straightened her posture, shaking off whatever strange feeling his presence stirred inside her. "You have to stay in the Carmack, okay? My father won't be kind to you if he finds out you're here. He doesn't trust outsiders." She rose to her feet, brushing stray strands of hair from her face. "I'll go get food. Don't leave," she instructed before stepping out into the cold morning air. A father's watchful eye. Outside, the village was alive with the familiar sounds of daily routine. The hammering of wood, the murmur of conversations, the rhythmic chants of hunters preparing for their next expedition. Navara took a deep breath, steadying her nerves, before heading toward her father's Carmack. Tarnuk, the village's chief and a man of great stature, was seated inside, sharpening his hunting knife. His broad shoulders, scarred from years of battle, were tense, his expression as unreadable as ever. The moment he saw her, he set the blade down and studied her carefully. "I haven't seen you around lately," he remarked. Navara felt her heartbeat quicken, but she forced a small, awkward smile onto her lips. "I've been helping Zakara with something," she replied casually, hoping he wouldn't press further. Tarnuk's piercing brown eyes remained on her for a moment longer, as though sensing something unsaid, but he simply grunted in response before returning to his task. Relieved, Navara murmured a quick goodbye and hurriedly left before he could ask more. The sacred gathering. As she stepped back into the village square, Navara noticed her mother moving quickly, her dark hair flowing behind her like a shadow against the snow. Something about the way Ryunara carried herself, determined yet cautious, piqued Navara's curiosity. Where is she going? Without thinking, Navara followed her. She weaved between the homes, keeping her distance until her mother finally entered a large dome-like structure, the sacred Carmack, reserved for the wise elders. Navara felt a shiver run down her spine. The elders only gathered when something of great importance needed to be discussed. Moving silently, she pressed herself against the leather-draped entrance, her breath fogging in the frigid air. The star's omen. Inside, the voices of the elders rose in hushed, urgent tones. "Ryunara, what have you seen?" one of them asked. "A stranger." Ryunara's voice was steady but laced with unease. "A man with the star." A collective gasp filled the room. Navara's eyes widened. "He has the star?" one of the elders repeated, his voice trembling. Ryunara nodded, moving further inside before lowering herself onto the floor among them. Murmurs erupted in every direction. Navara strained to listen, but the words were a chaotic blend of voices, making it difficult to make sense of them. Then, the oldest among them stood, raising his hands to silence the murmuring. "It is time," he said gravely. And then they began to sing. The song of the night. A haunting melody rose into the air, ancient and powerful, thick with magic. The air within the Carmack shimmered, a strange energy humming through the walls, making Navara's skin prickle. She had heard the song of the night only once before, as a child, during the night of a great storm. It was a song of prophecies and fate, whispered to them by the spirits of the tundra. And now it was being sung for the stranger. Navara's mind raced as she tried to recall the meaning behind the song. Then, the memory surfaced. The prophecy speaks of a man, accompanied by the wolf of snow. His coming marks a great change. Her heart thumped wildly in her chest. The stranger's arrival, the star on his hand. Could it really be him? A race against fate. Feeling a rising sense of urgency, Navara quickly pulled away from the entrance, her pulse hammering in her ears. She couldn't let the elders find him. If they truly believed he was the one from the prophecy, then his fate would no longer be in her hands, and something deep within her, something she didn't yet understand, refused to let that happen. Returning to the stranger, without wasting another moment, Navara grabbed the food she had originally set out for and rushed back to her Karmak. Chapter 7. The Exposure. A tense energy filled the air as she stepped back into the Karmak, her hands still cold from the outside air. The moment her eyes adjusted to the dim light inside, she saw them, standing opposite each other, locked in a silent battle of wills. Her brother Vorunak stood near the entrance, his broad shoulders squared, his fists clenched at his sides. His expression was sharp, his dark eyes blazing with suspicion as he glared at the stranger. The stranger, however, was unmoved. He stood just as tall, his posture defensive but calm, his own piercing blue eyes locked onto her brother's. A silent storm brewed between them, the air between them crackling with a tension she didn't understand. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she did. "What's going on here?" Navara asked, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. Both men turned their gazes toward her, but neither backed down. It was Vorunak who finally broke the standoff, exhaling sharply before dropping his arms to his sides. He stepped back and sat down on the nearest pile of furs, though his watchful eyes never left the stranger. "I should be the one asking you that, Navara," he said, his voice low and edged with frustration. She felt her stomach tighten. "Why would you bring a stranger home?" Vorunak demanded. She crossed her arms over her chest, standing her ground. "Rhaenyra is okay with it, so deal with it," she said firmly, her tone making it clear she wasn't going to argue. Vorunak scoffed, leaning back slightly as a slow smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "Will father be okay with it?" he asked casually, though the challenge in his voice was unmistakable. She froze. Her heartbeat skipped painfully at the mention of their father. He was right. Tarnuk, their father, the chief of the village, would never accept an outsider among them, especially one as mysterious as this man. Vorunak watched her carefully, his smirk deepening as realization dawned on her face. He knew she hadn't thought that far ahead. "Vorunak, please don't tell Dad," Navara said quickly, her voice almost a plea as she stepped toward him. His smirk faded slightly. "He'll be gone the moment he regains his memories," she assured him, her tone desperate but firm. "I swear it." Vorunak sighed, rubbing a hand over his face before shaking his head. "Be careful, Navara," he murmured, his voice lowering in warning. She frowned, confused by the sudden shift in his tone. "What do you mean? And why do all of you keep telling me that?" Vorunak stood up, throwing one last glance at the stranger before looking back at her. "There's something off about him," he said simply. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the Karmak, leaving Navara alone with the stranger. A lingering suspicion. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at the entrance where Vorunak had left. She could still feel the weight of his words, settling uncomfortably in my chest. There's something off about him. Slowly, she turned back toward the stranger. He was watching her, his blue eyes steady and unreadable, as if he had heard every single word Vorunak had said. For the first time, she felt a small thread of doubt weave its way into her thoughts. Who was he? And why did she feel so drawn to him despite the warnings she received and the warnings echoing in her mind? Navara swallowed hard, pushing the doubt away. She'll figure it out later. Or so she thought. For now, she just had to keep him hidden and make sure her father never found out. Chapter 8. The Bonding. A Growing Connection. Days turned into nights, and with each passing moment, she found herself growing more attached to the stranger. At first, Navara had thought it was mere curiosity, a fascination born from the mystery surrounding him. But as they spent more time together, she realized it was more than that. There was a quiet comfort in his presence. They fished together by the frozen lake, their laughter echoing softly across the icy landscape. He was clumsy at first, unused to the way the ice cracked beneath their weight, but he learned quickly, adapting with a quiet determination that made her smile. Other times, they simply sat together, speaking of things both small and grand. He asked her about her life growing up, her family, and the village she called home. In return, she asked him about his past, though his answers were always the same. I don't remember. Yet, despite his lack of memories, he listened to her intently. His deep blue eyes locked onto hers as if every word she spoke was something sacred. She found herself wanting to tell him everything, a shattered piece. But then everything changed. It was an early afternoon, and they were by the lake once again, the icy wind nipping at their faces. She stood near the water's edge, watching as he walked along the frozen surface, his expression relaxed. But then, suddenly, his body tensed. He stumbled. A choked sound left his lips as his hands shot up to his head, gripping it as if in agony. "No, no!" he gasped, his voice strangled with pain. Then he fell to his knees. She froze, her heart leaping in fear as she watched him convulse, his entire body racked with shudders. "Hey, what's wrong?" Navara cried, stepping forward. He didn't answer. His eyes were squeezed shut, his face twisted in torment. A scream tore from his throat, a sound so raw, so full of agony that it sent a shiver down her spine. She stood there, panicked, her mind racing. What should I do? She asked herself. She wanted to help him, but she didn't know how. He was trapped in something she couldn't see, something that had nothing to do with the frozen world around them. And then, without thinking, she moved. She rushed toward him and wrapped her arms around his trembling body. "It's okay," she whispered, pulling him against her. His breathing was ragged, his body shaking violently. But the moment she held him, he clung to her. His hands grasped the fabric of her parka, his head pressing into her shoulder as he let out a strangled sob. Navara held him tighter. His pain became her pain, his suffering something she desperately wanted to take away. For a long time they stayed like that, kneeling in the snow, locked in an embrace. Slowly the tremors in his body lessened. His breathing evened out, and eventually he fell asleep in her arms, a fragment of the past. The sun was beginning to set when he finally stirred. His head lifted from her shoulder, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," he murmured, his voice hoarse. Navara shook her head, brushing some of his damp hair away from his face. "It's okay," she said softly. She meant it. "What happened?" she asked gently. He swallowed, his fingers flexing against the snow. "I recalled a memory," he said. Navara stilled. "What did you see?" He exhaled shakily. "There was an airship," he began, his voice distant. "It was burning. I was in it. Men were screaming, some in pain, others in terror." She felt her stomach tighten. "One of them ran toward me," he continued, his hands clenching into fists. He grabbed me and yelled, "Rand, run!" she gasped. "Rand, is that your name?" He hesitated. "I think so," he murmured, almost unsure. But then his expression darkened. "It was chaos," he whispered. "Everything was falling apart. And then I saw it." Navara frowned. "Saw what?" His jaw clenched. "A figure," he said, his voice trembling. "It was dark, nightmarish. I couldn't see its face, but it radiated something terrifying." A chill ran down her spine. "It came close to me," he continued, his breathing growing uneven again, "and it touched me." She swallowed hard. "And then?" His eyes met hers, filled with something haunted and fragile. "Everything went dark," he whispered. "And when I woke up, you were holding me, the name of a nightmare." A cold dread settled over her. The pieces of his story, the burning airship, the terrified men, the dark figure, it was all too familiar. She pulled away slightly, her breath coming out in a visible puff. "You saw Malagar," she breathed, his expression sharpened. "Who?" Navara hesitated for only a second before answering. "Malagar," she said, "the shadow that walks, the bringer of darkness." He stared at her, confusion flickering across his features. "I don't understand." She took a slow breath and began to explain. Navara told him of the old legends, the tale of light and darkness, and the prophecy whispered through generations. A prophecy of a war between the forces of shadow and the warriors of the stars. A prophecy of a chosen one, a man marked by fate. As she spoke, she saw something shift in his expression. Understanding, recognition, fear, and deep beneath it all, a glimmer of something else, something dangerous. But despite the warning bells in her mind, she couldn't bring herself to let go. Not yet. Not when the weight of destiny had already begun to close in around them. Chapter 9. The Call to Valkorn, a kingdom in search of its lost heir. Far beyond the snow-laden village of Okaniv, across icy tundras and shadowed forests, the kingdom of Valkorn stirred with unrest. Rumors swirled through its streets like a raging winter storm. The lost heir is alive, spread by one of the airship crash survivors who didn't see him die. For years, the royal family of the Alpha King had searched for Prince Randor, heir to the throne of Valkorn, presumed dead after the fiery airship disaster that had claimed the lives of many warriors. Now, whispers traveled through the palace halls, carried by messengers and spies alike. The Alpha King's realm had lost its prince once. It would not lose him again. A name from the past. The sky blushed with the hues of dusk as Rand and Navara made their way back to Okaniv, carrying the fish they had caught earlier. The world around them was quiet, save for the soft crunch of snow beneath our boots and the occasional whisper of the wind through the trees. Yet, her mind was anything but quiet. Airships. Rand had spoken the word so casually, but to her it was alien, a thing of stories and myths. She had never seen one before, nor had she ever heard of them being used in battle. But now she knew his name. Rand. Navara smiled to herself. It felt good to have something to hold on to, a piece of him that was no longer shrouded in mystery. When she returned to the village, she wasted no time. She made her way directly to Vorunak's karmak, her breath visible in the cold air as she pushed through the entrance. Her brother sat by the fire, sharpening his hunting knife, his dark eyes flickering up in mild surprise at her sudden arrival. "Vorunak," she began, her voice urgent. "What is an airship?" He gave her a curious look before setting his blade aside. "Why do you want to know? Just tell me." The next morning, she found her mother, Ryunara, tending to the fire near their home. "Mother," she said, her voice firm. She turned to her with knowing eyes. "You wish to leave," she said before she could speak. Navara hesitated. Of course she knew. "Yes," she admitted. "Rand needs to know who he is. And I want to help him." Ryunara frowned. "Why do you care so much about him?" She bit her lip, searching for the right words. "I just feel drawn to him," she said finally. "Like it's my duty to help him." A heavy silence settled between them. Then Ryunara sighed. "You don't even know him, Nivara. And yet you're willing to risk your life for him?" "Yes," she whispered. She shook her head. "You know we must inform your father. Tarnuk will not like this. If his favorite daughter disappears, he will not sit idly by, and we have to tell him about Rand," Ryunara said without question. Navara swallowed hard. She knew her mother was right, a bargain with Tarnuk. That evening, Ryunara and Navara approached Tarnuk's karmak. He sat by the fire, speaking with several warriors. His sharp eyes flicked toward them, and she felt her heart hammer in her chest. "What is it?" he asked, his voice deep and authoritative. Ryunara stepped forward. "Navara wishes to accompany Vorunak to Valkorn to learn trade and visit Valkorn. With Rand," she said simply. Tarnuk's eyes narrowed. "Why? And who's Rand?" "Rand is a stranger passing by, and Navara needs to learn something," Tarnuk, Ryunara added smoothly. "A stranger in Okaniv. By the old gods, Ryunara. Tarnuk said he'll leave as soon as possible, Tarnuk, and Navara will be safe with Vorunak around, Rionara said, sounding assuring. Navara held her breath. Tarnuk studied her, suspicion clear in his gaze. He hesitated, then finally he exhaled. Fine, he said, but you will return within a moon cycle. Do you understand? She nodded quickly. Yes, father. Navara turned back and gave her mother a big hug. Excitedly, she left her father's karmak. The journey begins. The next morning, as the sun rose over the icy horizon, they prepared for their journey. Rand stood beside her, his face unreadable, while Vorunak scowled at both of them, clearly displeased with the situation. This is a mistake, he muttered, as they packed supplies onto the sleds. The answers lie in Valkorn, she reminded him. He exhaled sharply. Maybe. But the journey may cost us everything. Navara met his gaze, determination burning in her chest. Then so be it. And with that, they set off, toward a kingdom of wolves and kings, war and secrets, and a destiny waiting to be unraveled. Chapter 10. Journey through the tundra. A world of ice and silence. The first steps beyond Okaniv's borders felt like stepping into a different world. The cold was sharper, the wind wilder, the silence stretching for miles in every direction. The tundra was an endless expanse of white and gray, a barren world of frozen wastelands where the only sounds were the distant howls of the wind and the crunch of our boots against the ice. There was no path, no landmarks, only the vast open emptiness of a land that did not care whether they survived or perished. They were nothing there, small and insignificant against the might of the elements, and yet they pressed forward. Rand walked beside her, his breath visible in the frigid air. Vorunak led the way, his broad shoulders hunched against the icy wind, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his blade. None of them spoke for the first hour. There was nothing to say. This was survival now. Battling the ice and wind, the blizzard came without warning. One moment they were trudging through knee-deep snow under an overcast sky. The next, the wind screamed, whipping snow and ice into their faces, blinding them in a sudden storm of white. "Stay close!" Vorunak shouted over the howl of the wind. She felt Rand's fingers brush against hers as he reached for her, his grip strong and steady. She clung to his hand, her heart pounding as the wind threatened to tear them apart. The cold was a living thing, clawing at their skin, sinking into their bones. Navara could barely see Vorunak ahead of them, just a dark figure pushing through the storm. "We have to find shelter," Rand yelled. She nodded, though she wasn't sure he could see her. Her lips were numb, her breath came in short, panicked gasps. This storm would kill them if they didn't find cover soon. Then suddenly, "There!" Vorunak's voice rang out. Through the blinding snow she saw it, a formation of jagged rocks, half buried in the ice. A natural barrier against the wind. They forced their way toward it, step by agonizing step, the storm howling like a beast hungry for their flesh. When they finally reached the shelter of the rocks, she collapsed against the frozen ground, her body trembling violently. They were alive, for now, a fire in the dark. That night they made their first camp in the heart of the tundra. Vorunak built a small fire, shielding the flames from the wind with careful hands. The warmth was a blessing, seeping into her frozen limbs, though the flames were weak against the vast, unrelenting cold of the wasteland. Navara pulled her parka tighter around her, glancing at Rand, who sat across from her, his face illuminated by the flickering light. His hands were outstretched toward the fire, his fingers still shaking from the cold. His silver-dark hair was dusted with frost, and his usually bright blue eyes were heavy with exhaustion. She had never seen him look so vulnerable. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. He exhaled, nodding slowly. "Yeah. I wasn't expecting this. The tundra is merciless," Vorunak muttered. He sat beside Rand, sharpening his hunting knife, his face unreadable. "Many have died crossing it." Rand swallowed hard, glancing at her before looking back into the fire. Then why help me? He asked after a moment. Vorunak's hands paused on the knife, his dark eyes meeting Rand's. Because Navara believes in you, he said finally, and because if she's going to risk her life for you, I need to be there to make sure she doesn't die for nothing. Navara frowned. Vorunak, don't mistake my words, he interrupted, his voice firm. I still don't trust you, Rand, not fully. There's something about you that doesn't add up. You could be the lost heir of Valkorn, or you could be something else entirely. Rand stiffened, his jaw clenching. I don't even know who I am, he muttered. If I did, I'd tell you. Vorunak stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. Then we'll find out together. A heavy silence fell over us, broken only by the crackling of the fire, shared hopes and fears. As the night stretched on, exhaustion settled into their bones, but sleep did not come easily. Tell me about Valkorn, she said suddenly, breaking the silence. Vorunak glanced at her. Why? Because I've never seen it, and if we're going there, I want to know what to expect. Vorunak let out a slow breath, staring into the flames. Valkorn is nothing like Okaniv, he said. It is a kingdom of power, of werewolf warriors and kings. The Alpha King's rule is absolute, and his armies are unmatched. They say the capital is made of ivory and stone, floating airships that fill the sky with towers that reach the clouds and walls that have never been breached. Rand's eyes flickered with something, recognition, longing. And the Alpha King? She asked. Vorunak's expression darkened, a ruler unlike any other. Some say he is merciless, others say he is simply unyielding. But one thing is certain, he does not forgive betrayal. Navara shivered, though it had nothing to do with the cold. Rand's fingers curled into fists, his gaze distant. And if I really am his son? He murmured. What happens then? No one answered, because none of them knew. A moment of fragile peace. Sometime in the middle of the night, as the fire burned low, she felt Rand shift beside her. She turned to find him watching her, his expression unreadable. What is it? Navara whispered. He hesitated. I just don't know why you're doing this, he admitted. Why are you risking everything for me? She held his gaze. Because you matter, she said simply. Even if you don't remember who you are, you deserve to know the truth. And I want to help you find it. His throat bobbed, emotion flickering in his eyes. No one's ever fought for me before, not that I can remember, he whispered. She reached out, taking his cold, calloused hand in hers. Then let me be the first. A soft smile touched his lips, and for the first time since they left Okaniv, despite the dangers that awaited them in Valkorn, despite the storm that was surely coming, she did not feel afraid. Chapter 11. The first encounter. Whispers in the blizzard. The tundra stretched in all directions, an endless white abyss beneath a sky choked with heavy, swirling snow. Each step they took was a battle against the wind, which howled like a living thing, tearing at their cloaks, stealing warmth from their bodies. For days they had pressed forward, guided by Vorunak's unerring instincts, but the landscape remained merciless, testing their strength and will. It was on the 7th night that the first whispers came, faint at first, like the wind was calling their names. Do you hear that? Navara asked, pulling her furs closer. Vorunak's brow furrowed as he scanned the horizon. It's just the wind. Rand, however, did not look convinced. He had stopped walking entirely, staring into the thickening storm, his blue eyes shadowed with something distant, haunted. No, he whispered. It's something else. The air grew heavier around us, thick with an unnatural chill that even the tundra should not possess. Navara felt a strange pressure settle against her chest, making it difficult to breathe. The snowstorm was getting worse. No, not worse. Alive. A shelter in the ice. As night fell, they found refuge in a natural ice cavern, a hollow beneath an overhanging sheet of frozen rock that provided some shelter from the wind. Vorunak lit a small fire, but it flickered weakly, barely holding its own against the surrounding cold. Rand sat across from Navara, his gaze distant. She could tell something was troubling him, but before she could ask, Vorunak spoke. "We'll rest here, but we can't stay long. If we don't keep moving, we'll freeze before we reach Valkorn. I still don't understand how you can navigate this place," Rand muttered. Vorunak smirked. "You grow up in the tundra, you learn its secrets." But then, a sound. A deep, guttural whisper, curling through the ice cave like a creeping frost. "Did you hear that?" Navara whispered. Rand's breath quickened. His hands tensed against the ice. Vorunak slowly reached for his hunting knife. Then, the shadows moved. The attack, they rose from the swirling snow like living phantoms, emerging from the blizzard in shifting, nightmarish forms. Shadow creatures. Their bodies were made of shifting darkness, their hollow eyes burning with an unnatural black fire. They did not move like living things, but like smoke given form, their limbs twisting and reforming as they glided across the ice. Followers of Malagar. By the old gods, Vorunak breathed, gripping his weapon. The creatures lunged. Vorunak met the first with a quick, brutal strike, his blade slicing through the smoky form. But it did nothing. The shadow reformed, its glowing eyes fixing on him with an eerie hunger. "They're not solid!" Navara gasped, stumbling backward. One of the creatures lashed out, its clawed fingers sweeping toward her, and then, a blinding flash of blue light. Rand's star mark, the mysterious symbol on his hand, ignited with power, pulsing like the heart of a frozen storm. A surge of ice erupted from his fingertips, forming razor-sharp shards of enchanted frost which tore through the creatures with devastating force. The shadows screeched, recoiling from the attack as several of them were impaled, their forms flickering wildly before vanishing into the air. The cavern filled with crackling ice energy, a storm of frost swirling around Rand as his power surged forth, and yet his eyes were filled with terror. "Rand's awakening! Rand!" Navara shouted over the chaos, watching as he stood in the center of the storm, his hands outstretched, his body trembling. The energy was unstable, raw power coursing through him like an untamed force, his breath coming in ragged, uneven gasps. "I don't know how I'm doing this," he choked out, staring at his own hands in horror. The creatures shrieked, reeling away from the enchanted ice that had struck them. But they were not defeated yet. Rand staggered, his magic still surging out of control. Vorunak grabbed him by the shoulder. "Focus, Rand," he barked. "Control it!" But Rand's hands were shaking. The magic inside him was foreign, chaotic, something buried deep in his very being, something he did not remember learning. He gasped, eyes wide. "I can't stop it!" The ice around them began to crack. The storm outside roared. The creatures lunged once more, and then Rand released it all. A final pulse of energy exploded outward, freezing the very air around him, a shock wave of frost that engulfed the remaining shadow creatures, shattering them into nothingness. Then, silence. Rand collapsed to his knees, his breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. The star mark on his hand still glowed faintly, the last remnants of its magic fading away. The aftermath. The cavern was silent, except for the crackling of the weak fire. Navara slowly approached Rand, who was staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. "You used magic," she whispered. He swallowed hard. "I didn't even know I could." Vorunak's gaze was unreadable as he sheathed his knife. "By the old gods," he muttered, shaking his head. "Your magic burns with the fury of the winter storm." Rand looked up at him, confusion and fear warring in his eyes. What am I?" he whispered. Navara wanted to comfort him, to tell him everything would be all right, But she couldn't, because she had felt it too. The power inside Rand was not just light, there was something dark inside him as well, and that terrified her, a journey forever changed. That night no one slept. Rand sat by the fire staring at the flames, his thoughts a mystery. Vorunak watched him in silence, his suspicions shifting into something more complicated. And Navara lay awake, staring up at the ice ceiling, wondering what it all meant. Rand had unleashed magic that he had no memory of learning. Magic that was powerful enough to tear apart Malagar's minions. But where had it come from? And, more importantly, could he control it? Because if he couldn't, then the danger was not just from the creatures that hunted them. The danger was Rand himself. Chapter 12. The Unspoken Bond. A Fragile Peace. The battle had ended, but the echoes of it remained. The frozen cavern still carried the scent of ice magic and shadow, remnants of the creatures that had attacked them. The fire burned low, crackling softly, casting long, flickering shadows against the icy walls. Rand sat near it, arms wrapped around his knees, his breath still uneven from the storm of power he had unleashed. Vorunak paced nearby, inspecting his hunting knife, though his attention kept flickering toward Rand. Navara could see it, the unspoken conflict in her brother's eyes. Vorunak had never trusted Rand, but what he had witnessed tonight had shaken something in him. Navara, however, felt something different. Rand was dangerous, yes, but he was also lost, and for some reason that feeling struck deeper than it should have. "We should rest," she finally said, breaking the silence. Neither of them argued. But sleep did not come easily. Morning's light. By dawn, the storm outside had calmed, and a thin, pale light stretched across the tundra. Rand was the first to wake. He had not slept well. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of the battle, the creatures lunging at them, his magic surging the way the ice had obeyed his will without him even knowing how. It unsettled him. More than that, it scared him. He wasn't sure what was inside him, what kind of power had awakened, but he could feel it still lingering beneath his skin, like a sleeping beast that might wake again at any moment. "You're up early," Vorunak's voice came from behind him. Rand turned, surprised to see the other man standing there, fastening his hunting gear. "You should eat before we move on," Vorunak added, nodding toward the small bundle of dried meat near the fire. Rand hesitated. This was the first time Vorunak had spoken to him without suspicion, without that edge of distrust in his voice. Rand studied him for a moment, before finally picking up the dried meat. "You're different this morning," Rand said cautiously. Vorunak smirked. "You saved our lives last night. Even I can't ignore that." Rand gave a small, tired chuckle. "I wasn't exactly in control of what I did." "Maybe not," Vorunak admitted. "But you did it, and that means something." Rand nodded slowly. Perhaps this was the beginning of trust. And maybe, just maybe, Rand wasn't as alone as he thought. Hunting bonds. Later that day, as Navara prepared their supplies, Vorunak did something unexpected. "Come hunting with me," he told Rand. Rand blinked in surprise. "Hunting?" Vorunak shrugged. "You need to learn how to survive the tundra if you're traveling with us. Besides," he gave a half smirk, "might be useful to know what you're capable of when you're not blasting everything with ice." Rand hesitated, but then he saw Navara watching them from the corner of his eye, a soft smile on her lips. And for the first time in a while, he felt like he belonged. A lesson in trust. The tundra stretched vast and silent, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. Vorunak moved effortlessly through the snow, his movements precise, quiet. Rand followed, clumsy at first, stepping too heavily, earning a low chuckle from his companion. "You're hopeless," Vorunak muttered. "I'd like to see you throw ice spears," Rand shot back, grinning. Vorunak actually laughed at that. It was the first time Rand had heard him truly laugh. For the next hour, Rand listened, learned how to track, how to move lightly, how to blend into the landscape. And when Rand successfully downed a snow hare with a carefully aimed stone, Vorunak clapped him on the back. "Maybe you won't be useless after all," Rand smirked. "That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me." Vorunak rolled his eyes. "Don't get used to it." But something had changed. A friendship had begun. The aurora's light. That night, after they returned to camp, Navara took Rand aside. "Come with me," she said, leading him away from the fire. Rand followed without question. She led him up a small snow-covered ridge, the air crisp, the world around them vast and silent. When they reached the top, she gestured to the sky. Rand gasped. Above them, the aurora borealis stretched across the heavens, ribbons of green and violet dancing like living fire against the endless night. "I thought you should see it," Navara said softly. Rand was speechless. He had seen many things: war, bloodshed, the cruelty of men. But this was something else entirely. "It's beautiful," he murmured. Navara smiled. "It's said the ancestors watch over us through the aurora." Rand turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Do you believe that?" She hesitated. "I don't know, but I like the thought of it." Rand exhaled slowly. "I don't know what I believe anymore." Navara glanced at him, her eyes soft. "You don't have to figure everything out right now, Rand." Rand turned back to the sky. "I feel like a stranger to myself," he said. "Maybe that's why you're here," Navara said gently. "To find out." He looked at her then, really looked at her. There was something in her gaze, something warm, steady, something that anchored him when everything else felt uncertain. For the first time in a long time, Rand felt like he wasn't just a lost shadow wandering through the world. He felt seen. Under the aurora's light, something shifted between them, something unspoken, something undeniable, the lingering darkness. But as dawn approached, that fragile peace was disrupted by something else, something deep inside Rand. As he lay awake by the fire, he felt it again, a presence within him, a hunger, a darkness that had stirred the night before when he had fought the shadow creatures. It was still there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting. And for the first time since this journey began, Rand was afraid. Not of Malagar, not of what lay ahead in Valkorn, but of himself. Because what if the magic he had awakened wasn't meant to save them? What if it was meant to destroy? Chapter 13. The Hot Spring of Reckoning. The journey toward Valkorn was an endless trial of endurance, a battle against both the elements and the ever-present shadow looming over them. Each night the air grew colder, heavier, as if the very land itself resisted their passage. The wind howled like a wounded beast, carrying whispers that unsettled even Vorunak, who had never feared anything in his life. But it was Rand who bore the greatest burden. Since the attack in the ice caves, something had shifted within him. Navara could see it, the way his hands trembled when he thought no one was looking, the way his gaze lingered on his own reflection in frozen lakes, as though searching for something he feared to find. The darkness inside him was growing. And Navara knew time was running out. She was mad at herself for not knowing how to help him. A hidden oasis. On the fourth night, they reached the borderlands of Valkorn, where the land rose into frostbitten cliffs and jagged rock formations. The journey had been long, and exhaustion clung to them like a second skin. "We should rest here," Vorunak said, surveying the terrain with cautious eyes. Then something unexpected caught Navara's attention. Through a narrow break in the cliffs, a thin silver mist curled into the night air. As she moved closer, she felt it. Warmth. "A hot spring," she murmured in awe. Rand and Vorunak followed, and as they stepped into the hidden cove, their breaths caught. The spring was a marvel of nature, a pool of steaming water nestled within ice and stone, its surface shimmering beneath the full moon's glow. The contrast of warmth against the frozen world gave it an almost otherworldly beauty, as though it belonged to a time long before men and wolves walked the earth. "I never imagined such a place existed out here," Rand whispered, eyes wide. "Valkorn is full of secrets," Vorunak muttered, his gaze scanning the cliffs as if expecting an ambush. But Navara felt something different. A strange sense of peace, a rare moment of sanctuary in their otherwise treacherous journey. "We should take advantage of this," she said, already stepping toward the edge of the spring. "It might be the only warmth we find before reaching Valkorn." Neither man argued. A moment of vulnerability. Steam curled around them as they stepped into the water, the heat sinking into their frozen bones, soothing the aches they had collected along the way. Vorunak leaned against the edge, eyes closed, letting out a rare sigh of contentment. Navara sat beside Rand, watching as he stared into the water, his face unreadable. She could tell something was weighing on him. "Rand?" she asked softly. He hesitated before answering. "I don't know who I am anymore," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ever since that incident with the shadows, it's been getting worse. The power inside me. It feels like something else is controlling it, like I'm just waiting for it to consume me." Navara's chest tightened at his words. "It won't consume you," she said firmly. Rand let out a bitter laugh. "How can you be so sure? You saw what happened back in the tundra. That magic. It wasn't just ice, Navara. There was something else in it, something dark." He looked at her then, and in his eyes she saw a war raging within him, fear, sorrow, longing. "I feel this darkness inside me," he confessed, his voice raw. "But with you, it softens." The words sent a shiver through Navara's spine. She reached for his hand beneath the water, her little fingers wrapping around his large ones in a silent promise. "Let the warmth of our souls guide us through this endless winter," she murmured. Rand exhaled, his grip tightening around hers. For a moment, the world outside their little haven ceased to exist. It was just them, two souls, lost but not alone. But even as Navara held on to that fragile peace, she knew the real battle had yet to begin, and the darkness was still waiting. Chapter 14. The Wolf's Chosen. The Forbidden Embrace. The night air was crisp, the scent of winter lingering despite the steam curling from the hot spring. The sky stretched endlessly above them, stars flickering like distant embers, and the moon, full and luminous, bathed everything in an ethereal silver glow. Vorunak was already asleep, tired and exhausted. It was a night untouched by war, by prophecy, by the shadows that had chased them across the tundra. And yet Navara knew this night would change everything. She had felt it for days now, the pull between them growing stronger with each step toward Valkorn. It was not just a fleeting attraction, not just the lingering warmth of friendship forged in fire and frost. It was something primal, something older than them both. It was the bond. Rand had been restless. She had noticed the tension in his body, the way his eyes flickered between their usual ice blue and something darker, something untamed. She had seen the way he clenched his fists when she was near, the way his breath hitched whenever their hands touched. His wolf had chosen her, and deep down she had chosen him too, but he fought it. Even now, as they sat by the edge of the spring, the mist rising around them like ghosts of the past, he resisted. Navara watched him stare into the water, his expression distant, the muscles in his jaw tight with restraint. "I don't deserve this," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't deserve you." Navara's heart ached at the torment in his voice. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his bare shoulder, feeling the tension coiled beneath his skin. "That's not your decision to make." Rand turned then, and his gaze burned into hers, a storm of emotion swirling in his ice-blue eyes. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rough with something deeper than fear. "My wolf, he wants to claim you, and once that happens, there's no turning back." Navara met his gaze without flinching, then stopped fighting it. The moment the words left her lips, something inside him snapped, a reckless surrender. 1 second, he was staring at her as if he were standing at the edge of a cliff, and the next, he was on her. Rand moved with a ferocity that sent her breathless, pinning her against the smooth stone beside the spring, his body pressing into hers, his large muscular frame covering her little physique. His warmth was everywhere, burning through the cold night air. "Tell me to stop," he growled, his breath hot against her lips. But she didn't. Instead, she tangled her fingers into his silver-streaked hair and pulled him down, capturing his lips with her own. The moment their lips met, the bond ignited, roaring to life between them like wildfire. Navara gasped as the heat surged through her, burning away every doubt, every fear, until there was only this, only him. Rand's control shattered. A deep guttural growl rumbled in his chest as he deepened the kiss, his hands gripping her waist with a possessiveness that left no room for hesitation. They had fought this for too long. The bond was inevitable. It had always been inevitable. There was no more running, no more pretending. His lips left a scorching trail down her neck, his fangs grazing her pulse, sending a shiver down her spine. Navara's breath came in soft, desperate gasps as she pulled him closer, needing more, needing everything. They shed their barriers, clothes, fears, doubts, until there was nothing left between them but skin and heat and the unrelenting call of their souls. Rand worshipped every inch of her, his hands reverent yet hungry, as if he were memorizing her with every touch, every kiss, every whispered breath. And when the moment came, when he was inside her, moving with an ancient rhythm, raw and consuming, she knew she was his, and he was hers, forever. Rand buried his face in her neck, his breath ragged, his body trembling against hers. "I can't hold back," he rasped, his voice wrecked with emotion. Navara cupped his face, forcing him to meet her gaze. "Don't," she whispered. "I want this. I want you." His restraint shattered. The bond snapped into place. Rand let out a deep primal growl as his fangs sank into the curve of her neck, marking her as his. The pain was fleeting, almost drowned beneath the flood of pleasure and power that followed. Because the moment his mark took hold, something inside Navara awakened. Her own wolf rose to meet his. With a sharp inhale, she tilted her head, and without hesitation, she bit him back. The moment their marks were sealed, the air around them crackled with energy. A wave of power pulsed from their bodies, shaking the very earth, sending ripples through the water, the moonlight around them intensifying as if the heavens themselves bore witness to their union. A vow in the dark. After they lay entwined, the world around them silent, save for the quiet crackling of the fire and the sound of their steady breathing. Their bodies still hummed with the aftershocks of the bond, their souls forever bound in a way that no force, not Malagar, not destiny, not even death, could break. Navara traced slow, lazy patterns along Rand's chest, her heart full, yet uncertain. "Let this night be our salvation," she murmured, her lips brushing his shoulder, "even if the world deems it forbidden." Rand turned to her then, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "You're mine now," he said, his voice low, reverent, unshakable. "No force in this world will take you from me." She smiled, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "Then fight for me, Rand." She met his gaze, unwavering. "Fight for us." He inhaled sharply, as if the very thought of losing her was unbearable, and then, slowly, he reached into his discarded parka and pulled something from the inner pocket. A ring. It was not made of gold or silver, nor was it adorned with jewels. It was simple, carved from the wood of their first refuge in Okaniv, a token of their journey, their survival, their bond. Rand took Navara's hand, sliding the ring onto her finger, his touch reverent. "From the very first time I met you, you made my heart pound, and without caution, I got attached to you. From the first time you fed me and cared for me without hesitation, I fell in love with you, even when you were the kind stranger Navara. I'll always love you, and will always find my way back to you in darkness, because you're my source of light. With this ring I bind my soul to yours, he murmured, his voice steady, filled with quiet certainty. Come darkness or light. Navara's heart swelled, joy and trepidation warring within her. She had known love, but never like this. This was devotion, this was forever. She kissed him again, sealing the promise between them. But even as their souls settled into the newfound bond, neither of them knew what awaited them in Valkorn. Neither of them knew that their love would soon be tested beyond anything they could imagine, and that the real war had only just begun. Hunting under the northern moon. The journey to Valkorn was long and brutal. As Navara, Rand, and Vorunak got close to the vast large borders of Valkorn, the icy wilderness, the cold winds howled like spirits mourning the dead. Snow stretched endlessly in every direction, painting the land in an unforgiving white. Supplies were running low. Game was scarce. If they wanted to survive, they needed to hunt. Rand turned to Vorunak. We go together? Vorunak grunted, already pulling off his parka. His brown eyes gleamed with the primal excitement of the hunt. Navara sat by the fire, pulling her furs tighter. Just don't bring back something with 6 legs. I've heard the creatures in this part of the world aren't normal, Rand smirked. We'll bring you something fresh, mate. Then he and Vorunak stepped away from the fire's warmth, into the cold embrace of the wild. The moment they were out of sight, they shifted. Rand's wolf form was as magnificent as ever, black as the abyss, powerful and silent as death. His ocean eyes flashed under the moonlight, scanning the tundra ahead. Vorunak's wolf was different. His fur was silver white, blending perfectly with the wintry surroundings. While Rand was built for stealth and speed, Vorunak was made for brutality. Larger, stronger, and almost predatory in his stance. They didn't need words. They communicated through instinct, through the bond of the hunt. Rand's ears flicked. A faint heartbeat echoed in the distance. Something big. They moved as shadows, weaving through the snowdrifts, their breath misting in the freezing air. Then they saw it. A massive Icelandic elk, its body scarred from past battles with predators, its antlers sharp as spears. It stood alone, unaware that 2 apex predators had marked it. Rand's muscles coiled. Vorunak's hackles raised. Rand circled right. Vorunak took the left. The elk snorted, sensing danger, but too late. Rand struck first, lunging low, snapping at its hind leg, forcing it to stumble. It let out a furious bellow, kicking wildly, but before it could recover, Vorunak was already there. He crashed into the beast's side like a thunderstorm, knocking it off balance. His massive jaws clamped around its throat, fangs piercing deep. The elk thrashed, kicking wildly, but Vorunak held firm. Rand darted in, his jaws finding the elk's windpipe, tearing through flesh with one decisive bite. Silence. The elk fell, its breath steaming in the icy night before it stilled forever. Then Vorunak huffed, shaking the snow from his fur. Good hunt. Rand licked the blood from his muzzle. Not bad. Together they grabbed the elk and dragged their prize back to where Navara waited by the fire. She looked up as they approached, smirking at their bloodied forms. Took you long enough. Rand shifted back into human form, shaking snow from his hair. Next time you'll hunt, with me, Navara snorted. I'll pass. Vorunak let out a rare chuckle, throwing a piece of raw meat onto the fire. You'd be surprised, Rand. I think she'd make a fine predator. Navara raised an eyebrow. Was that a compliment? Vorunak simply shrugged, settling in by the fire. As the flames crackled and the scent of roasting meat filled the air, they allowed themselves a moment of peace, for now the night belonged to them. The next morning they crossed over the last mountain and arrived at the large stone-walled borders of Valkorn. Chapter 15. Arrival in Valkorn, a city of legends. The wind howled through the mountain pass as the trio descended into the heart of the Alpha King's realm. Navara pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders, though the chill that ran down her spine had little to do with the cold. Valkorn. It stood before them in all its majestic, terrible beauty, the capital of the werewolf dominion, the seat of the Alpha King's power. Even after days of travel, Navara had not been prepared for the sheer grandeur of it. Towering ivory castles stretched toward the heavens, their spires glistening in the evening sun. Soaring stone bridges arched across the city like great ribs, connecting districts that sprawled over the jagged cliffs. The streets bustled with wolf-born and mortals alike, merchants shouting in the marketplace, airships drifting above the sky, their gleaming hulls adorned with the sigil of the ruling house. Yet beneath the splendor, there was a tension in the air, a whisper of something ancient and unresolved. Beside her, Vorunak surveyed the city with his usual grim expression, one hand resting on the hilt of his blade. But it was Rand who drew her attention. He had gone still the moment Valkorn came into view. His fingers curled into tight fists at his sides, his breath uneven. His normally sharp, unreadable expression had cracked, revealing something Navara had never seen in him before: uncertainty. "Rand," she murmured, placing a hand on his arm. He didn't look at her. His gaze was locked onto the great wolf-emblazoned banners fluttering above the highest castle, the emblem of his birthright. "Prince Randor, the lost heir." The people began whispering and bowing to him. The people looked in surprise as they paved a way through Valkorn streets straight to the palace. A lost heir returns. As they approached the palace gates, a hush fell over the crowd. The moment the guards laid eyes on Rand's star mark, they dropped to their knees in silent reverence. The air crackled with the weight of the moment. "Your arrival heralds the dawn of a new era," intoned the captain of the palace guard, his voice steady but filled with something Navara could not name. Awe, caution, fear. Rand tensed. Navara could see it in the way his shoulders tightened, in the way his jaw clenched. He had never wanted this, never wanted a throne, a title, a legacy steeped in war and blood. Yet fate had brought him back, and the people of Valkorn would not let him leave so easily. The massive palace doors swung open, a slow, groaning welcome, and a warning. Ghosts of the past, the scent of ancient stone and polished steel filled the grand hall. Golden chandeliers bathed the throne room in light, their glow flickering over the towering wolf statues lining the walls. The crest of the Fenrir bloodline was everywhere, woven into the tapestries, carved into the obsidian throne at the far end of the hall. Rand walked forward with measured steps, his boots echoing in the vast chamber. Navara and Vorunak followed, but the moment Rand crossed the threshold, something inside him shifted. Memories struck him in flashes. A warm voice, his mother's laugh, the scent of lavender as she tucked him into bed. His father, King Fenrir, standing tall and unyielding, teaching him to wield a blade. The night sky, lit up with the flames of a burning airship. Rand's breath came faster, his pulse hammering. Then came the darkness, the touch of something cold and unholy. Malagar. The warlock's face remained blurred in his memory, but the sensation of that night remained, the pain, the fire, the curse that had been laid upon him. He felt Navara's presence before he saw her. She had stepped closer, concern evident in her ocean eyes. "Rand?" she whispered. He exhaled sharply. "I remember," he murmured. Her fingers brushed against his, grounding him, pulling him away from the storm of his past. "We face this together," she said softly. Rand looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back to the throne ahead of him. This was only the beginning, but he was ready. Chapter 16. The Royal Embrace. The return of the lost heir, The opulent halls of Valkorn Palace were just as Rand had remembered them, grand, imposing, and steeped in the weight of his lineage. Gold-trimmed banners depicting the crest of House Fenrir hung from the arched ceilings, their deep crimson fabric whispering with each subtle gust of wind. The scent of pine, burning embers, and old magic filled the air, stirring something deep in his bones. Rand stood motionless at the threshold of the throne room, his heart hammering against his ribs. It had been years since he had last set foot in these halls, since the night his airship fell from the sky, since the night Malagar touched his soul and left behind a stain that never faded. And now he was here again. Another door within the throne room swung open before them, revealing a throne of polished obsidian seated atop a raised dais. Behind it, massive stained glass windows cast fractured light across the hall, illuminating the figure, King Fenrir, Rand's father. The years had been unkind to the once mighty ruler. His once jet-black hair had been streaked with silver, and deep lines carved the corners of his mouth. But his presence remained unshaken, his eyes sharp as a blade as he took in the sight of his son, the son he had long believed dead. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then King Fenrir rose from his throne. With thundering steps, he descended the dais, his crimson royal cloak billowing behind him. Rand braced himself, expecting an outburst, a demand, an accusation. Instead, he was engulfed in his father's embrace. Rand stiffened. The scent of pine and steel, his father's scent, it was familiar and foreign all at once. "My son," Fenrir murmured, his voice gruff with emotion. He pulled back just enough to grip Rand's shoulders, his gaze searching, scanning, trying to reconcile the boy who had vanished with the warrior who now stood before him. "You've returned." Rand swallowed against the knot in his throat. "I have." From behind them, murmurs rippled through the gathered court. Rand caught glimpses of nobles exchanging looks, a mixture of awe, uncertainty, and fear. And then there was her, Queen Isla. She stepped forward, her silver white hair cascading over her shoulders, her expression stricken with disbelief. Tears glistened in her ocean eyes. "Randor?" she whispered, as if afraid that saying his name aloud would make him disappear. Rand barely had a moment to react before she reached him, pulling him into a fierce embrace. "My sweet boy," she sobbed, clutching him as if she never wanted to let go. Rand closed his eyes, guilt lancing through him. He had been gone so long, too long, the curse within. But the moment of reunion was short-lived. As Rand pulled back, he noticed the way his mother's eyes darkened. Not with sorrow, but with worry. His father, too, studied him with a new kind of intensity. And then, the royal mystics stepped forward. They were draped in dark blue robes, their silver masks glinting under the torchlight. The head mystic, an elder with piercing violet eyes, stepped closer. "Forgive us, Your Highness, but we must confirm something." Rand stiffened as the mystic lifted a hand wreathed in golden energy and pressed it against his star mark. Pain, a searing electric pain lanced through Rand's body, making his knees buckle. Navara moved closer, concerned. "Don't harm him," she said with a warning, Vorunak grunting angrily, as the royal guards held them back. He bit back a growl as the power delved deep inside him, exposing what lay hidden. The room dimmed, the torches flickering wildly, and then a shadow erupted from Rand's chest. The court gasped. The shadow pulsed, dark tendrils writhing like living smoke, stretching toward the mystic's glowing hand. Rand felt it then, Malagar's presence, buried deep in his soul, lurking beneath his skin like a parasite. The mystic staggered back, his breath sharp. "He is tainted," he declared. "The warlock's touch is still upon him." The murmurs grew louder. Queen Isla covered her mouth in horror and rushed to hold her son, while King Fenrir's expression turned grim, calculating. "What does this mean?" Navara demanded, stepping protectively beside Rand. The mystic turned to the king. If we do not purify him, he will succumb to the darkness. Malagar will take hold of him, and he will not only be lost to us, he will become a vessel for ruin, a king of shadows. After all, he's supposed to be crowned Alpha King rightfully. A heavy silence fell upon the hall. Rand gritted his teeth. He'd always felt it, the dark pull within him, the whispers in the back of his mind. But to hear it spoken aloud, to have it confirmed so plainly, it ignited something furious and raw inside him. "And if you do purify him?" Navara asked, her voice tight. The elder mystic hesitated. It would rid him of the taint, he admitted, but it would also damage his wolf, his essence. He may lose what makes him. Rand's wolf snarled within him at the thought. Navara's fingers curled into fists. "You're saying you would strip him of what he is?" she said, stepping forward protectively. "That's not an option." King Fenrir exhaled heavily, conflicted, torn. "Young girl," he said, his voice firm, "you do not understand what is at stake. If Malagar controls him, he won't." Navara's voice was steady, unyielding. "Rand is still here. He's still him, and I will not let you destroy him in the name of fear." Rand turned to her then, his chest tightening at the fire in her gaze. She was fighting for him, for his right to exist as he was, despite the darkness. For the first time in years, someone was choosing him. King Fenrir's expression darkened, his eyes flickering between his son and the woman standing so defiantly before him. "If we do nothing, we risk losing him to the enemy." "Then we find another way," Navara shot back. "I don't care how impossible it seems. We will find another way." The tension in the room was palpable, a battle of wills. Rand stood between them, his mother holding him tightly, devastated at the thought. His father's cautious authority, Navara's unwavering faith. But in that moment, he knew where he stood. "She's right," Rand said, his voice steady. King Fenrir's lips thinned, but he did not argue. Not yet. Because even as Navara's words rang with determination, even as Rand clung to the belief that he could fight the darkness, Malagar was still watching. And his time was running out. Chapter 17. A Queen's Council. The halls of Valkorn Palace were silent at this late hour, save for the rhythmic click of Navara's boots against polished marble. The flickering torchlight cast elongated shadows along the gilded walls, and an eerie stillness settled in the corridors. Navara's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of what was to come. The summons had been clear. The Queen requests a private audience. Queen Illyra Fenrir, the moon-blessed Queen of Valkorn, had ruled beside King Fenrir for decades with grace and formidable strength. She was not a woman who tolerated weakness. Navara knew that much. And now, she had called for her. Navara clenched her fists as she reached the ornate double doors to the Queen's private chambers. A deep breath steadied her resolve before she pushed them open. Inside, the air smelled of lavender, roses and old parchment, a scent both soothing and severe. The chamber was lit only by a few enchanted lanterns, their glow casting soft silver light over the massive bookshelves lining the walls. At the center of the room, seated in a high-backed chair of dark mahogany, was Queen Illyra. She was as striking as the rumors claimed. Her silver-white hair cascaded in elegant waves over her shoulders, her ocean eyes sharp as a hawk's. Dressed in deep midnight blue robes embroidered with golden celestial sigils, she exuded an aura of power that sent a shiver down Navara's spine. She did not rise. "Come in, Navara." Her voice was smooth, measured, the voice of a ruler who had seen wars and betrayals, victories and heartaches. Navara stepped forward, head held high, refusing to appear weak before the Queen. "Do you know why I have called for you?" Illyra asked. "I imagine you have concerns," Navara said carefully, choosing her words like a soldier laying down weapons before a battle. The Queen exhaled, tilting her head slightly. Her ocean eyes studied Navara, seeing more than just the surface. Concerns, she echoed. Yes, let us call them that. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Then Illyra leaned forward. You have no royal blood, no noble ties. You are a warrior, a wanderer. Yet you stand at my son's side, willing to defy a king for him. Navara's throat tightened, but she did not flinch. I stand by Rand because I believe in him. Believe? Illyra's lips curved into something like amusement, a powerful word. But belief alone does not win wars. It does not silence prophecy, nor does it undo the darkness in his veins. Navara's jaw clenched. She had expected this. With all due respect, Your Majesty, Navara said, you think I am blind to what Rand carries inside him. I am not. Illyra's gaze did not waver. There was no anger in her expression, only deep calculation. Then tell me, she said, why do you believe your presence is what he needs? What makes you so certain that you can shield him from the fate written in his blood? Navara stepped closer, her voice steady. Because I know him, she said simply. Because I have walked beside him when no one else would. Because I have seen him fight against the darkness rather than surrender to it. Illyra exhaled through her nose, her ocean eyes searching Navara's as if she could unravel her soul with a single glance. You love him. Navara's eyes widened, not expecting that. It was not a question. Navara lifted her chin. Yes, for the first time the Queen's expression softened, just slightly. Love is a powerful word, she murmured, perhaps the strongest of all. She rose from her chair then, moving to the grand window that overlooked the silver-lit rooftops of Valkorn. For a long moment, she gazed out at the city, lost in thought. But it is also a dangerous weapon, she said at last, one that can be turned against the very people it seeks to protect. Navara felt her breath catch. The warning was clear. You fear I will become his weakness, Navara said quietly. Illyra turned to her, a knowing gleam in her eyes. No, my dear, she said. I fear that if Malagar ever learns how much Rand loves you, he will use it to destroy you both. The words struck Navara like a blade to the chest. She had known the risks, she had always known. But hearing them spoken by the Queen herself, it made them real in a way that was difficult to ignore. And yet, Navara said after a moment, I will not abandon him. Illyra studied her for a long time. Then, to Navara's surprise, the Queen smiled, a small, almost wistful curve of her lips. Good, she murmured. Navara blinked. Good? Illyra turned fully, her regal posture unshaken, her gaze unreadable. If you had promised to step away, to let him face this alone, I would have doubted your resolve, she said. But you are willing to stay, to fight, even when the world tells you to run. That is the kind of strength he needs. A strange sort of relief filled Navara's chest. But the Queen was not finished. However, Illyra continued, if you are to remain at his side, you must understand the burden you now carry. She stepped closer, so close Navara could see the ancient wisdom etched into her face. Loving a prince is one thing, she said softly, but standing beside a future king who carries the shadow of his enemy, that is something else entirely. Navara held her gaze. I know, she said, and I accept it. Illyra studied her one final time. Then, to Navara's shock, she reached out and took her hands. Then may the moon watch over you both, Navara, she murmured. Her touch was warm, steady, a mother's touch. And just like that, Navara knew she had won the Queen's trust, at least for now. But as she left the chamber, her heart still heavy with the weight of the Queen's warning, Navara could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Because Malagar was out there, and he was watching. Chapter 18, Doubts Among the Court. The gilded halls of Valkorn Palace were not unfamiliar with whispers, Rumors traveled faster than the royal messengers, carried on the lips of courtiers who spoke in silken tones, their daggers hidden beneath layers of embroidered velvet. This was the way of the court, a battlefield of words and influence, where reputations were both made and undone in the time it took for a candle to burn. And now, all whispers were about her. Navara could feel it as she walked through the long, gold-trimmed corridors. Eyes lingered too long, voices hushed as she passed. Women in beautiful silken gowns exchanged knowing glances, and men with jeweled cuffs spoke just loud enough for her to catch fragments of their discontent. A foreigner? A Kalari girl? What claim does she have? The prince was gone for years, and he returns with her? Navara clenched her fists, refusing to let the murmurs sink beneath her skin. She had expected this. Of course she had. She was not blind to the way the court worked, especially when it came to bloodlines and power. The Kalari clan of Okaniv had no noble ties, no great banners hanging in the halls of history. Her people were warriors, known for their stealth and unyielding loyalty, not for polite diplomacy or political games. She did not belong here, and that was exactly what they intended to remind her of. The royal life of Valkorn. A steward adorned in silver and navy robes guided Navara to her chambers, while another led Vorunak toward the Alpha's wing, where he would reside with Rand. Navara and the Queen's Court. Navara's chambers were nestled in the heart of Queen Alira's court, where elegance and refinement shaped every aspect of life. The moment she stepped inside, she was enveloped in a delicate fragrance of lavender, its scent weaving through the silk drapes and plush seating. The room was a masterpiece of beauty, with moonlight-colored tapestries, gold-framed mirrors, and fresh flowers adorning every corner. Despite the room's splendor, none of it could compare to Navara's own radiant beauty, a fact that did not go unnoticed by the ladies of the court. Queen Alira, regal and graceful, welcomed Navara warmly. "You shall find your place among us, child," she said, her deep blue eyes studying Navara with something akin to admiration. "Strength and beauty rarely go hand in hand, but you possess both in abundance." Navara bowed her head respectfully. "I will do my best to honor the customs of Valkorn." The court ladies, dressed in flowing gowns of soft pastels, watched her with curiosity, whispering among themselves. Some admired her for her striking presence, while others, out of envy, kept their distance. But Navara had long learned that true power did not come from outward beauty alone. It came from the fire within. In the days that followed, Navara adapted to life in the Queen's court. The dining halls were filled with aromatic dishes, from roasted meats laced with honey and herbs to exotic fruits that glistened under the chandelier's glow. The royal dressmakers adorned her in silks and velvet, styling her hair in intricate braids that were dusted with tiny pearls. Yet despite the luxury, Navara found herself yearning for something more, something beyond the etiquette lessons and perfumed air of the palace. Vorunak and Rand, brothers in arms. Unlike Navara, Vorunak found himself at ease in Rand's wing, where warriors and strategy took precedence over courtly mannerisms. His chambers were grand but practical, built for a fighter, stone walls adorned with ancient swords and wolf banners of prestigious pack families surrounded a spacious hall where warriors gathered to speak of past battles and future conquests. Rand, no longer just the Alpha King's son but now a brother to Vorunak, welcomed him without pretense. "You'll fit in here well," Rand said, clapping a firm hand on Vorunak's shoulder. "We fight, we drink, and we prepare for whatever the world dares to throw at us." Vorunak grinned. "Sounds like my kind of life." The two bonded quickly, their friendship forged in the fire of war but tempered by the simpler moments of shared laughter and training. Every morning before the sun kissed the horizon, they would spar in the training grounds, their movements sharp and precise, the clang of steel ringing through the crisp air. Vorunak, though a formidable warrior, found himself challenged by Rand's unmatched agility and sheer strength. "You fight like a man possessed," Vorunak admitted one day, wiping sweat from his brow after an intense duel. Rand smirked. Perhaps I am. Or maybe it's just that I refuse to lose. Together, they trained not only for themselves but for the future of Valkorn, ensuring that when the time came, they would be ready for any battle that lay ahead. The nightly visits. Despite the demands of his duties, Rand never neglected Navara. Each night, when the palace had quieted, he would find his way to her chambers, slipping past the guards with practiced ease. He would find her curled on a cushioned chaise by the fireplace, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her expression distant as though lost in thought. "You should be resting," he would tell her, stepping into the warm glow of the chamber. She would look up, her lips curving into a smile. "And miss the only time of day I get to hear your stories?" Rand would settle beside her, his presence grounding her. He spoke of old legends, tales of the moon goddess and the first alpha kings of Sintra, of warriors who defied fate and lovers who found each other across centuries. His voice was deep, filled with reverence and warmth, and Navara would listen, captivated by the worlds he painted with his words. "I never knew you had such a talent for storytelling," she teased one night, leaning her head against his shoulder. Rand chuckled. "You're the only one I tell them to. I like you better in your park as Navara. I never want to forget the moment I opened my eyes and saw a beautiful girl in her atiji. Ocean eyes, kind-hearted and loving," he said as he stroked her cheeks, looking at her lovingly. As he came close and kissed her, they spent the night together. Blades and heartbeats in Valkorn. The sky above Valkorn shimmered with a gentle snowfall, the sun casting silver rays through the high arched windows of the training courtyard. Navara had asked Rand to train her for what's coming. She stood at the edge, her breath clouding in the cold air, her fingers curled around the hilt of a training blade. Across from her, Rand watched her intently, his arms folded, ocean blue eyes flickering with both amusement and admiration. "You're holding it like it's a flower," he teased, walking up behind her. "That blade won't protect you if you're afraid to let it become part of you." Navara scowled. "Easy for you to say. You were born with a sword in your hand." Rand smirked. "No, I was born with a burden." The blade came later. He stepped behind her, his strong arms wrapping around her gently, his hands guiding hers along the blade's grip. "Relax your shoulders. Feel the weight. Let the steel speak to your instincts." The closeness of him sent a flutter through her chest. His scent, clean snow, pine and something warmer, wrapped around her like a second cloak. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing the sensation to ground her. "I'm not used to being this close to a man," she murmured. "I'm not just a man," Rand whispered near her ear. "I'm yours." Their eyes met, and something ancient stirred between them, trust, curiosity, perhaps even the roots of something deeper. But the moment passed as Rand stepped back and called, "Again." Hour after hour passed with sparring, corrections, laughter, and the occasional tumble into the snow. Navara fell more than she stood, but with each fall, Rand was there, his gloved hand extended, his expression never mocking. "I'm a terrible student," she groaned, sprawled in the snow. "You're determined," he corrected. "That makes you dangerous, eventually." At night, after training, they would walk the palace halls together, shoulders brushing, cloaks swaying in the cold. Rand told her stories of ancient Valkorn kings and the hidden scars beneath their crowns. She listened, sometimes smiling, sometimes silent, until one evening they paused before the moonfire tree in the palace courtyard, its silvery blossoms glowing like frozen stars. Rand turned to her. "You know why I'm really teaching you?" Navara raised an eyebrow. "To laugh at me?" He smiled softly. "No, because you remind me of the world I want to protect. Your fire and honesty and something that makes this frozen kingdom feel alive." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She didn't flinch. "And because I want you by my side when darkness comes, not behind me." She stared into his eyes, stunned by the rawness in his voice. "I thought you needed someone strong." "I do," he said, "and I think you're already stronger than you know." The night deepened, stars shimmering above. Rand leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. Neither spoke. Their breaths mingled in the cold. By the second week, Navara's training blade was no longer an accessory. It was a promise. She moved with precision, her body growing stronger under Rand's constant encouragement and gentle correction. He made her laugh when she was frustrated. She made him open up in ways he never had. One late afternoon, after a particularly long session, they sat on the edge of the courtyard, watching the sun dip beneath the snowy pines of Valkorn. Navara rested her head on his shoulder, and Rand let out a long, content sigh. "I never thought I'd find peace again," he said quietly. "You did?" she said, smirking. "I still trip every time I try to spin." He laughed, the sound deep and warm. "Then let's fall together." As the stars blinked awake and the air grew colder, they sat wrapped in one another, two souls bound by blade, by frost, by the quiet, powerful bloom of something real. And though war would come again, and their peace would be tested, in that moment, beneath the glow of the moonfire tree and the watchful gaze of the palace towers, Rand and Navara found something eternal. The snow that fell in Valkorn was different from anywhere else, softer, purer, almost enchanted. Navara stood in the palace training yard, the chill brushing against her cheeks, her fingers trembling slightly from both cold and anticipation. Today marked weeks under Rand's personal training, and despite the bruises and exhaustion, she felt more alive than ever. Rand approached from the arched doorway, his cloak billowing behind him, eyes gleaming like the ocean. He carried 2 wooden blades. "You're early," he said, tossing one to her. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Too much energy, or nerves. Maybe both." He stepped closer, tilting her chin up gently. "Good. You need a little chaos to survive a storm." Their training began with swift strikes, parries, and counter moves. Rand no longer went easy on her. He respected her growth too much for that. Navara's movements had become fluid, purposeful, and she matched his rhythm almost intuitively. "Faster," he called, and she responded, pivoting and striking with fierce determination. A low whistle escaped him. "You're starting to scare me." "Good," she panted, smirking. "You should be." When she finally disarmed him, knocking his blade into the snow, they both froze in surprise. Then Rand laughed, chest rising and falling. "You've earned a reward," he said, walking over and wrapping his arms around her. "Come, let's go somewhere warm." They entered the Valkorn Library, one of Rand's favorite places, a sprawling room of carved oak wood shelves, glowing crystal lanterns, and fur-lined reading alcoves. A fire roared softly in the hearth, rare in a kingdom of ice. Navara sat near the fire, clutching a steaming mug of spiced cider. Rand settled beside her. "You never really told me what made you want to fight," he said. She looked into the fire, eyes distant. "Because I'm tired of watching others protect the world while I stand still. I want to be more than a witness. I want to be the blade that turns the tide." Rand touched her hand. "You already are. The moment you chose to stand instead of run, you became something more." Their gazes locked, the heat between them burning hotter than the flames. In the following days they trained not just in combat but in strategy. Rand taught her battlefield formations, how to read enemy movements, and how to use terrain to her advantage. In turn, Navara challenged him with fresh ideas, her unique perspective honed from a life outside royalty. They spent evenings in the starlit conservatory, sharing dreams. "I want to see the sapphire lakes," she whispered one night, her head resting on his chest. "And the crystal cliffs." Rand smiled, brushing her hair aside. "When everything's over, I'll take you there myself." "But what if—" "No," he said, firm but soft. "No what ifs, only promises." One evening, Navara returned from the sparring arena late, covered in sweat and ice. Rand was waiting in her chamber with a gift, a custom-forged blade made from starlight steel, its hilt inlaid with froststone. "It's yours," he said, placing it in her hands. "It belongs to the warrior you've become." She stared at it, speechless. "I love you, Navara," he said quietly. "Not just for who you are now, but for who you're becoming." Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she kissed him. Not out of gratitude, but because her heart left her no other choice. They didn't speak of war that night. They spoke only of hope, and of each other. Their bond grew unshakable. When they walked the icy halls of Valkorn, guards and nobles bowed not just to a prince and a warrior, but to a future forged in unity. Where once there had been two paths, now there was one. And though darkness loomed, and their love would be tested in battles still to come, in Valkorn they found what most never do, a sanctuary carved from snow and steel. A love tempered by fire and fate, two warriors, one story, together. Their moments together became sacred, stolen fragments of time that belonged only to them. And though the weight of the kingdom pressed upon them both, in those quiet hours, they were just Rand and Navara, two souls bound by destiny and choice, a kingdom united. Time had passed. Both Navara and Vorunak had fully immersed themselves in the life of Valkorn. Navara became a beacon among the queen's court, a symbol of strength and elegance, while Vorunak stood as Rand's second in command, a warrior with a heart as fierce as his blade. Rand and Vorunak became inseparable, their friendship one of loyalty and mutual respect. They trained together, hunted together, and, on rare occasions, shared tankards of ale beneath the vast Valkorn sky. Speaking of the past and speculating on the future, "I never thought I'd like it here," Vorunak admitted one evening as they watched the stars from the training grounds. Rand nodded. "Neither did I. But sometimes home isn't where you're born, it's where you choose to stay." "But we can't stay," Rand Vorunak said silently. "Father wants us back before the next moon cycle begins," he added. "I just hope everything ends before then," Vorunak said sadly. Rand stood there quietly imagining a life without them, the gathering of doubts. The court was always at its most dangerous when assembled in the great hall of lords. The night Rand and Navara were to be presented before the court of Valkorn, the amber chandeliers cast long shadows, making the polished floors gleam like molten gold. High-backed thrones lined the walls, occupied by noble alpha werewolves and their lunas whose bloodlines traced back centuries: Frostfang, Stormbane, Ashclaw. The air smelled of wine, parchment, and the faint scent of dried roses, a fragrance meant to cover the stench of deceit. At the far end of the chamber sat Alpha King Fenrir, in his large alpha fur coat, his gaze unreadable, and Queen Illyra, as beautiful as the moon, her ocean eyes sharp. To Nivara's left sat Rand, the lost prince returned. He was silent but watchful, his presence alone enough to command the room. But Nivara knew this fight was hers to endure, and then the voices rose. "Forgive my boldness, your majesty," began Lord Varian, a man in robes of midnight blue. His voice was smooth, polished from years of courtly deception. "But surely you see the concern. A woman of unknown bloodline standing at our prince's side? The people of Valkorn deserve assurance. They deserve certainty." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Lady Catherine Stormbane, a luna draped in violet silk, arched a delicate brow. "Certainty," she echoed. "Yes, that is what we lack. Who is she? A warrior from a distant land? A girl of no noble house? What proof do we have that she has not ensnared the prince?" Rand's fists clenched at his sides, but Navara placed a hand on his wrist. A silent plea. "Let me handle this." She turned to face them, lifting her chin. "You speak as if my presence threatens the throne," Navara said, her voice even. "Yet you forget. I stood beside your prince when the world had abandoned him. I nursed him, fed him, and faced an endless darkness beside him. Would you have preferred I left him to die?" A few nobles shifted in discomfort. But Lord Saravan, a man known for his cutting tongue, merely smirked. "So the prince owes you his life," he mused, swirling his goblet of wine. "And what does a woman do with such a debt? What does she demand in return?" There it was, the insinuation that she sought power, that she had bound Rand to her, using his gratitude as a leash. Whispers burst in the hall. Navara met his gaze, unwavering. "I ask for nothing," she said. The hall was quiet immediately. "Except that you see me for what I am, a warrior, a protector. I have no crown to seek, no title to steal, but I will not stand idle while you question my worth." A silence fell. Queen Alira watched her carefully. King Fenrir's expression was unreadable, but Lord Varian was not finished. "And yet," he murmured, "the people of Valkorn see something else. They see a prince with a shadow at his back, a prince marked by Malagar's curse, and now, beside him, a girl from a land that does not belong to us. Tell me, are we truly to believe that you, an outsider, can guide him out of darkness?" A few nobles nodded. "Navara. Her name is Navara," Rand said, loosing his patience. Rand stiffened beside her. This was not just an attack on Navara. It was an attack on him, and she would not allow it. "I do not expect your faith," Navara said slowly, "only your patience. Rand is not the lost boy you remember. He is a grown man now, stronger than you think, and if you would rather let your fear blind you to what he is capable of, then you are unworthy of the ruler he will become." The hall fell into an uneasy silence. Suddenly the Alpha King's court was alive with murmurs, nobles and high-ranking wolves seated in their places, anticipation thick in the air. The scent of dominance and authority filled the chamber, but it was nothing compared to the fire burning in Rand's chest as he sat before them all. His piercing ocean eyes swept over the court, daring anyone to challenge him. His muscles became tense, his wolf brimming just beneath the surface, ready to tear apart anyone who dared deny what he was about to say. Then he spoke. His deep, commanding voice echoed across the hall. "I declare before the entire court, before my father, the Alpha King, and before the moon goddess herself, Navara is my mate." Gasps rippled through the room, disbelief flashing in the eyes of the elders, while some whispered furiously among themselves. Rand didn't falter. He tightened his grip on Navara's hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. No one will defy me in this." His voice dropped to a dangerous growl, his wolf pushing forward. "I am the son of the Alpha King, the next in line. My word is law." Silence fell over the room. Even the most powerful alphas in attendance dared not challenge him. Then Lord Severin stood up, his sharp eyes narrowing as he observed them, his lips curled into a knowing smirk. "This no mere claim," Severin said, his voice carrying through the stunned court. "They have bond-marked each other." A collective gasp erupted. Eyes widened as all heads turned toward Rand and Navara's necks, barely concealed beneath the fabric of their clothing. Rand's jaw clenched as he turned his head slightly, revealing the deep mark on his skin, the undeniable proof of their connection, and on Navara's delicate neck, peeking out from under her collar, the matching mark of their bond. The room descended into chaos. Whispers turned into outright exclamations of disbelief. "Impossible," one elder hissed. "They did this without the king's approval?" another muttered. The Alpha King sat at his throne, eyes unreadable, his expression carved from stone. He exhaled sharply, gripping the armrests of his seat. Rand's fingers held Navara's hand tightly. His gaze dared anyone to object. "We are mated," Rand declared, his voice unwavering. "It is done, and if anyone thinks they can challenge it, let them try." The air was charged with dominance, with the raw power of a bond that could not be denied. And as Navara met Rand's gaze, the smallest, secretive smile played at her lips. Then Queen Alira spoke. "Enough. Her voice cut through the chamber, silencing all dissent. Even Lord Varian dared not defy her directly. The queen rose from her seat, her eyes sweeping over the gathered werewolf nobles. "You may doubt," she said, "but you will not let doubt make fools of you. My son has returned, and the girl beside him is not some scheming court puppet. She is here because she has earned her place." She turned her gaze to Navara. "But know this," she continued, "your loyalty will be tested. The court will not easily forget its suspicions." Navara met her gaze. "Let them test me," she said. "I will not break." A pause. Then a small, almost imperceptible nod from the queen. But Navara knew this battle was far from over. A court of daggers. The tension did not fade as the night deepened. In the shadowed corridors, whispered conversations continued. Noble werewolf lords and ladies spoke in hushed voices, their minds already scheming. Navara was not welcomed here, and they would not let her forget it. And in a darkened corner of the palace, Lord Varian stepped away from the gathering, his expression cold. "If the king and queen will not see the threat, then we must act ourselves." A figure stepped from the shadows. "And what would you have us do?" Lord Severin asked. Lord Varian smiled, slow and deliberate. "We remind her where she truly belongs." The game had begun. Chapter 19. The Mystic's Warning. The palace lay shrouded in the deep hush of twilight. Beyond the towering windows of Valkorn's grand halls, the night sky stretched vast and unbroken, punctuated only by the cold gleam of stars. But within the shadowed corridors of the mystic's sanctum, light flickered in unnatural hues, blue and violet flames burning in silent defiance of the dark. Rand strode forward, his heart weighed by uncertainty. The royal summons had come at dusk, delivered in hushed urgency by one of the palace's elder advisors. The mystics wished to see him, alone. He had known this moment would come. Ever since he had returned to Valkorn, the weight of the star mark on his hand had grown heavier, the whispers in his mind more insistent. Now, as he stepped past the towering archway into the sanctum, he braced himself. The prophecy foretold. The chamber was vast yet intimate, its walls lined with ancient tomes and celestial maps. Enchanted candles burned in clusters, their flames flickering as though responding to his presence. A scent of aged parchment and incense filled the air, mingling with something colder, something eldritch. At the center of the room, 3 figures stood cloaked in robes of deep indigo, their faces obscured beneath embroidered hoods. Prince Randor, the tallest among them, intoned, his voice ageless, heavy with the weight of unseen truths. Rand did not correct him. He had spent years surviving as Rand the Wanderer, Rand the Forgotten. But here, in this moment, he could not deny what they saw in him. "We have awaited your return," the second mystic murmured. Her voice was softer, yet no less burdened with warning. "You have felt it, haven't you?" the third asked. Rand stiffened. He knew what they meant. The pull. The whisper of a voice just beneath his own thoughts. The shadow stretching within him, coiling around his soul like unseen chains. "Yes," he admitted, his voice low. "Tell me what it means." The tallest mystic lifted a wrinkled hand, and at his gesture the flames of the candles surged brighter, casting eerie, elongated shadows against the chamber walls. "The star mark of your hand is no mere birthright, Prince Randor," the mystic said. "It is a bridge, a tether between realms." The air in the room seemed to tighten. "You stand at the edge of 2 worlds, one of light, one of shadow, and soon you must choose which path to walk." Rand clenched his fists. The words rang with prophecy, with fate pressing down upon him like an iron shroud. "And if I do not choose?" The second mystic stepped forward, the violet glow of the candles reflecting off her silver-threaded robes. "Then the choice will be made for you," she whispered, "and not by your own hand. The dark truth." Rand swallowed, his throat dry. He knew what they meant. He had felt it, the pull of something beyond his control. You speak of Malagar. The third mystic nodded solemnly. He marked you that night, he said, not simply as his enemy but as his vessel. If the cursed connection is not severed, he will claim you. A chill crawled down Rand's spine. He had suspected as much, but hearing it aloud made it real. How do I sever it? He asked, his voice steadier than he felt. The three mystics exchanged glances. There is only one way, the eldest admitted, but it will not be without sacrifice. Rand's jaw tensed. He already knew what they would say before they spoke it. You must be purified. Rand exhaled sharply. He had heard this word before, the day he arrived in the palace halls, conversations between his father, the Alpha King, and the court mystics. And in doing so, I risk losing my wolf, he muttered. The silence that followed was confirmation enough. Your wolf is your spirit, your power, the second mystic said softly. To purge Malagar's hold on your soul, you may have to purge the very essence of what makes you whole. Rand closed his eyes for a moment. A world without his wolf. A world where he was only half of himself. And if I refuse? The eldest mystic exhaled deeply, his shoulders heavy with unspoken grief. Then Malagar will wait, he said. He will bide his time, watching, whispering, until the moment comes when you are weakest. And then... Rand felt it before the words even left the mystic's lips. A pulse of something dark, a tendril of cold slithering through his mind. A presence, a whisper. Rand. His breath hitched. It was here. The mystics stiffened as the air in the room shifted, the enchanted flames flickering violently, their glow dimming. Rand. It was not spoken aloud. It did not come from the mystics. It came from within. Malagar's temptation. Rand staggered back, pressing a hand to his temple. His heartbeat pounded too loud, too fast. His vision blurred, the mystic's chamber warping, the walls stretching as though reality itself had begun to unravel. And then... he was somewhere else. The chamber vanished, replaced by a vast, endless void of swirling mist. The ground beneath him was obsidian black, a surface that pulsed and shifted like something alive. And before him, standing tall, stood a figure cloaked in shadows. My son, the figure murmured. Rand's breath caught. You are not my father. Malagar chuckled, his voice deep and rich with amusement. Oh, but I could be, he said, stepping closer. The black mist curled around his form like living tendrils. His eyes, pale silver, like a predator beneath the moon, pierced through the dark. They seek to sever our bond, Malagar mused. They wish to tear away what makes you powerful. And you would let them? Rand gritted his teeth. You cursed me, he spat. You tried to destroy me. Malagar tasked softly. Destroy you? No, Randor. I marked you because I saw what you could be, because I know your potential. And now they would have you cast it aside? For what? For fear? The whispers slithered through his mind, insidious, tempting. You could be more, Rand, Malagar murmured. You could be so much more than what they allow you to be. You could rule the whole world. Rand's vision swam, his thoughts pulling in two directions at once. He could feel the power, the dark tendrils curling just beneath his skin, waiting. Embrace it, Malagar urged, and I will show you what it means to rule. The void pulsed around him, the mist growing denser, thicker. The shadows reached for him, beckoning. Rand wavered. He could feel it, the offer of power, of freedom, of control. But then, a voice, Nivara. The chamber pulsed with an eerie, dark, otherworldly glow, the air thick with dark energy as Malagar's magic wrapped itself around Rand like invisible chains. Navara stood before him, her ocean eyes shimmering with both determination and fear. She had come to bring him back, to break the Dark Lord's hold, but the Rand before her was no longer the same. His once warm gaze was now laced with something dangerous, something inhuman. Rand, she whispered, stepping closer despite the weight of the dark magic pressing against her chest. Come back to me. His expression flickered for a moment, a brief shadow of hesitation, but then Malagar's voice slithered through the space between them. She is weak. She will only drag you down. Show her what true power is. Before Navara could react, Rand's hands shot out, wrapping around her throat with a strength that stole the breath from her lungs. She gasped, clawing at his wrists, but he held firm, his grip unyielding. Her vision blurred as her body trembled in his grasp. "Rand, please?" she choked out, searching his face for a glimmer of the man she loved. His eyes flickered, battling against the darkness clawing at his soul. His grip tightened for a heartbeat more, and Navara felt her strength slipping. But then, a single tear slid down her cheek. It landed on his hand, searing like fire against his skin. Rand's body jerked, his breath hitching as if the tear itself had cracked through the darkness clouding his mind. "No," he growled, his voice breaking. His grip loosened, and he stumbled back, horror washing over his face as he looked at Navara gasping for breath. "No, no, no. What have I done?" Malagar roared in fury, the shadow surging forward, but Navara wasted no time. She reached for Rand, cupping his face with trembling hands. "Fight it," she whispered, her voice raw. "Fight him." Rand shuddered, his entire body racked with pain as he battled the dark force within. Navara held on, refusing to let him go, even if it meant stepping into the abyss with him. The battle for his soul had begun, and she would not let him lose. Chapter 20. The Breaking of Bonds. The halls of Valkorn Palace were colder than usual, though no one dared to speak of it. The icy stone walls, once radiant with the golden glow of torches, now seemed to whisper with unseen shadows. Tension coiled in the air, thick as a coming storm, and at its center stood Rand. But the worst of it came from Vorunak. The air was thick with tension as Vorunak stormed into the hall, his eyes blazing with fury. Rand barely had time to turn before Vorunak's fist connected with his jaw, sending him staggering back. "You strangled her?" Vorunak's voice was a low, dangerous growl, his hair wild from the run. "You nearly killed Navara, my sister!" Rand wiped the blood from his lip, his golden eyes flickering between his usual self and something much darker. The remnants of Malagar's influence still clung to him like a shadow. "I wasn't myself," he muttered, his voice hollow. The darkness. "I don't care about your excuses," Vorunak roared, stepping closer. "You don't lay a hand on her. You don't hurt her." His wolf was dangerously close to surfacing, his nails elongating into sharp claws. Rand's eyes darkened, the deep hum of Malagar's magic still whispering in his mind. His body tensed, a snarl curling on his lips. "You think I don't hate myself for it?" His voice boomed, but it wasn't just his voice. It was layered with something deeper and dark, something not entirely his own. "I didn't want to hurt her," Vorunak scoffed. "Then why do I still see his darkness in your eyes?" The accusation hit like a blade. Rand's body trembled, his hands clenched into fists. The air around them grew heavy with raw energy, an invisible force crackling between them. "Careful, Vorunak," Rand warned, his voice edged with something unnatural. "You don't want to test me right now." Vorunak bared his teeth in a wolfish snarl. "Oh, I do." Without hesitation, Vorunak lunged. His fists struck Rand's ribs, his wolf-enhanced strength sending him crashing through the wooden table. But Rand was fast, too fast. Before Vorunak could land another blow, Rand moved with unnatural speed, grabbing him by the throat, slamming him against a pillar with his alpha strength, kept slamming him several times, Vorunak's bones breaking, his blood staining the pillar, until he was almost lifeless. For a moment, the world stilled. Vorunak gasped, his claws digging into Rand's wrist, his brother-in-law's dark eyes eerily, flickering between the man he was and the darkness gripping him. "This isn't you," Vorunak gritted out, struggling in Rand's grasp. "Malagar still has his claws in you." Rand's grip tightened, before suddenly releasing. He stumbled back, panting, eyes wide with horror. His hands trembled as he looked at them with Vorunak's bloodstains, as if he no longer recognized himself. Vorunak coughed blood but didn't back down. "You need to wake the hell up, Rand," he said, voice rough, "because the next time you touch her like that, I will kill you." Rand clenched his jaw, his entire body trembling from the war raging inside him. "I would let you," he whispered. The silence between them was deafening. The torches flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows across the walls. A deep, unnatural silence settled over the room. And then Navara stormed in. She rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside Vorunak. "Stay with me, no, stay with me," she murmured, her eyes glistening with tears. She had never seen Vorunak so weak and nearly lifeless. It terrified her. Rand's stomach twisted. This was not what he wanted. This was not what he had meant to do. He stepped forward, but Navara's fierce gaze stopped him. "Don't," she said, her voice tight. "Not now." The pain in her eyes cut deeper than any blade. Rand turned and found the entire court staring at him, some in fear, some in anger, and in his father's eyes, in King Fenrir's cold, unreadable stare, there was something worse than either. Disappointment. Rand swallowed. He had always feared that he would lose control, and tonight he had proven that fear right. The aftermath. An hour later, the palace halls were empty, but the weight of his actions remained. Rand stood alone in his chambers, hands braced against the stone window ledge. The cold wind bit at his skin, but he barely felt it. "I never wished to hurt you, Vorunak," he whispered into the silence. But the darkness, it compelled him. The door creaked open. Navara entered, her face still shadowed with sorrow. "He will heal," she said softly. Rand nodded, but the guilt did not ease. "I'm so sorry, Navara. I need to fix this," he murmured. Navara stepped closer, searching his face. "Then prove them wrong," she said. "Control this before it controls you." Rand closed his eyes. He had to, or else he would lose everything. Chapter 21. Flight into the Night. The silence of Valkorn Palace was different tonight. Heavier, as if the very walls had absorbed the weight of everything that had transpired within them. Rand stood at the edge of his chamber, the cold wind from the balcony caressing his face. His heart was breaking, but he had made his decision. It had been days after the incident with Navara and Vorunak. He could no longer stay, not after what he had done, not after what he had become. Beneath the silver light of the twin moons, he looked down at his hands, hands that had once protected, now stained with the unintended harm he had caused. The memory of Vorunak hitting the stone pillar replayed over and over in his mind. The way Navara had looked at him, not with fear but with sorrow. "I never wished to hurt you, Vorunak," but the darkness had coiled around him, forcing his hand. Now the court whispered of him in hushed tones. The king, his own father, looked at him with disappointment, and Navara, who had fought for him, who had believed in him when no one else would. She would never leave him, but if he stayed, she would suffer. The choice was clear. Rand clenched his jaw, picking up his cloak, fastening the silver clasp at his throat. The soft creak of the door behind him made him pause. He knew who it was before he even turned. "No," Navara whispered, standing on the threshold. Her eyes, glistening with unshed tears, held his soul in place. Rand exhaled slowly, turning to face her. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice barely above a breath. Navara stepped forward, determination written in every line of her face. "You think I wouldn't feel it? That I wouldn't know?" She shook her head, anger and pain laced in her voice. "You were going to leave without telling me." Rand swallowed hard, looking away. "It's better this way." "For who?" Navara's voice cracked. "Because it's not better for me, Rand. It never will be." He closed his eyes, forcing himself to stay firm. "Navara, I am dangerous. I hurt you. I hurt Vorunak. If I stay, then we fight it," she cut in, stepping closer. Together, that's what we do. Rand turned back to her, his chest aching at the sheer force of her belief in him. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, she snapped. You're afraid. But you're not running from Malagar, are you? You're running from yourself. The words struck deep. Rand stiffened, but Navara reached out, her hands trembling as she grasped his hand. You are not lost, she whispered. Not yet. He wanted to believe her. Gods, he wanted to. But Malagar's voice had already begun whispering in his mind. Dark, insidious, relentless. You know this is futile, don't you? The voice murmured in his head. She cannot save you. No one can. Rand shuddered, shaking off the feeling. I can't risk it, he said finally, his voice thick. I can't risk you. Navara's breath hitched, and for the first time he saw the fear beneath her anger. Not fear of him, fear of losing him. Rand, please, she whispered. Don't do this. A long silence stretched between them, a silence filled with unsaid things. Rand reached up, gently tracing his fingers along her jaw, memorizing the way she felt beneath his touch. You are my light, he murmured, but I can't let you burn for me. A tear slipped down Navara's cheek. Then come back to me. Rand swallowed, leaning down to press his lips to hers. It was not a kiss of passion, nor of longing. It was a kiss of goodbye. When they parted, Navara gasped softly, clutching onto his tunic as if willing him to stay. I will find my way back to you. Navara's fingers curled, her shoulders trembling. Return to me, Rand, she whispered, her voice breaking. I will wait in every heartbeat until you are whole again. Rand's breath caught. And then he turned. Before his resolve could shatter, before he could change his mind, he stepped into the darkness of the night. The cold wind wrapped around him as he disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind only a whisper of his presence. And Navara, standing alone beneath the silvered balcony, clutching the ring he gave that night at the spring against her chest. A vow in her heart, a promise in her soul. She would bring him back, no matter what it took. If you enjoyed this audiobook, subscribe to my channel for the second part of this book and more interesting audiobooks. Join my channel by becoming a member and have early access to stories and second parts of books. Save the playlist for more upcoming audiobooks. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Check out new audiobooks in my channel. What do you think will happen to Rand? Comment your answers in the comments section. Thanks for listening.